Do you think a police dog costs? Just throw it out. What do you think? Okay. Why are we doing this?
You agreed to do this, Chris. I did.
Solve problems, you know. That's just that was a long time.
You're still married?
John was at the city
I'm still running, but not that kind of.
engineer.
Maybe 4 days a week.
He said,
And now, takes too much for comfort.
getting in people's face doesn't always get you what you want, you know? Well, the mayor's going to have to open. Well, that's right. Yeah.
Let me do a couple of logistic things before you go to the votes. Just so someone can so everyone is present.
Okay.
We would like to welcome everyone this evening to the fiscal year 2022-2023 Budget Committee meeting, and it is May the 17th, 2022. I will call the Budget Committee meeting to order and ask the City Recorder to take a roll call.
Mayor, we're starting the Urban Renewal Agency meeting first.
Excuse me. Let me back up. I knew that. And we are calling we're calling the Urban Renewal District Budget Committee meeting to order this the 17th, May 17th, 2022. And so I call to order the Urban Renewal District Budget Committee and ask the City Recorder to take our roll call.
Committee Member Haas? Cherry, I know you're on mute, but we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? I'm present.
Yes, thank you. Counselor Geary?
Here.
Committee Member Maxfield?
Here.
Counselor Minky?
Here.
Committee Member Hart.
Here.
Council President Drapkin. Committee Member Harmon Ferry.
Here.
Councilor Chenoweth. Committee Member Phoenix.
Here.
Councilor Garvin.
Here.
Committee Member Ernst. Councilor Peralta. Committee Member Seiler is absent this evening, and Mayor Hill.
Here. Thank you, Claudia. We are now going to go to the elections of the Urban Renewal Budget Committee Chair. I'll ask for I'll call for nominations of the chair, and then, so any nominations for Chair of the Urban Renewal?
I'd nominate Jerry Hart.
Okay. Any other nominations? Hearing none. We have before us the nomination of Jerry Hart to serve as our chair of the Urban Renewal Budget Committee this evening and any preceding meetings going forward. I will now conduct a roll of the Urban Renewal Agency for the chair of the Urban Renewal Agency. Do we do a poll on this, Claudia?
We could just do a voice vote.
Okay. All those in favor of Jerry Hart to serve as our Urban Renewal Budget Chair, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, Jerry Hart has been elected our Urban Renewal Agency Chair in a unanimous vote. And so what we'll do is turn the gavel, which I never use, over to Jerry. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you all for trusting me to be the chair. I have a mask on, and if you don't hear me very well, please let me know. And you also hear me cough tonight. There's a little coughing thing going on in my family. Multiple COVID tests have all turned out to be negative. The culprit is our 3-year-old grandson who has spread it. There's no other thing, no fever, no anything other than a cough. So I have this on, and we'll keep it on during the meeting for that reason. The first item on the agenda after the election of the chair is a motion to approve the May 24, 2021 Budget Committee meeting minutes.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
I believe that was a delayed yes from Councilor Minke. So that's been
Yes.
approved unanimously. Thank you, Kelly. The next order of business is for the presentation of the budget message by the city manager. And go for it, Jeff.
Thank you, Chair Hart, Mayor, members of the City Council, lay members of the Budget Committee. Let me handle a couple of logistical issues for you tonight, since this is the first budget meeting we've had mostly in person for 2 years, and it might be the first time some of you have been in the room in a really long time. First and most important, the mics are hot all night long. You can see the little green light. Green means go. If you need to kill your mic, you can push the button, pick up. Otherwise, it's going to hear you. And then the other issue is if you need to take a break, restrooms are behind this wall across from me, and you can best easily get the restrooms out through the main lobby. And with that, I'll happily deliver a brief budget message and then turn it over to Heather Richards, our planning director, to walk you through a couple of slides on the Urban Renewal District budget. Just a reminder that you serve as the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee at the designation of the City Council. Our Urban Renewal Agency was created in July of 2013. It's a 170-acre area that includes our historic downtown, as well as the neighboring property to the northeast of downtown, commonly known as Granary District. The Urban Renewal Agency is a separate entity from the city, and that's why you act as a separate budget committee tonight. The Urban Renewal Agency will be in its 9th year in this coming year, and the revenue that's generated is based on what's called new growth in assessed value. The assessor froze the value of the property within the urban renewal district as of the commencement of the district, and increases in assessed value total about $43.1 million since that time. And that's the assessed base that the Urban Renewal Agency's revenue is generated from. This fiscal year, we propose expenditures of just under $438,000. Significant projects, which Heather will go to in a little bit more detail, include a business assistance program, the 3rd Street Improvement Project, which was initiated in 2018-2019 and will continue into the coming fiscal year, an update of the 2000 Downtown Improvement Plan, and planning for district identity improvements. We expect total revenue for the district to be about $598,000 this year, and we use that in addition to ongoing expenses. We use that to pay the debt and both the interest and the principal on a bank loan that was acquired in 2016-2017. I thank you for your time and attention, and will now turn it over to Heather Richards for a more detailed presentation. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry I'm not with you tonight, but I think you won't be sorry that I'm not with you tonight. My poor son is at home struggling with COVID. So, but with that said, I wanted to share my screen and talk to you a little bit about the Urban Renewal Agency budget. I'm assuming you can see my slide.
Yes, we can, Heather.
Okay, great, thank you. So Urban Renewals funds two things. It funds public improvement projects, and then it also participates in public-private partnerships with private developers to fund development in the urban renewal area, and that's what generates the additional tax base to fund the public improvement projects. So we have in the past done the Alpine Avenue Street Improvement Project. We participated with the Atticus Hotel on a property assistance grant. And currently we're underway in participating in a property assistance grant with what's called the Boutique Retreat, which will be a tiny home hotel on the corner of 9th and Alpine. And they are also responsible for building the street improvements on Northeast 9th Street. So Jeff shared a little bit about urban renewal with you. This is a slide of the actual district. The Urban Renewal Program is governed by a plan. We have 13 projects in that plan. It amounts to about $30 million over the life of the plan, and it's a 25-year plan. The 13 projects are illustrated here. The plan itself talks about how much is meant to be spent on each project and when those projects are meant to be implemented. The Urban Renewal Agency is a city council, and then they have an advisory committee that helps them implement the plan, which we call MURAC, the McMinnville Urban Renewal Advisory Committee. That committee works on a 5-year strategic plan. This is a copy of that, where they talk through those public improvements that they want to work towards building, and then also how to generate more investment in the urban renewal area through private development. So the focus has always been funding into development assistance for private development, and then doing a couple of large public improvement projects each year. MURAC then goes through a process of identifying how much to spend on each project each year as they're building these projects up, and they bring that to the Urban Renewal Agency in early February as part of their annual report. So in the urban renewal budget, you have two funds, Fund 59 and Fund 58. I'm going to address them backwards because it makes more sense to me that way. But Fund 59 is the debt service fund. That is also where you see the property taxes that are collected annually come into that fund. And then it's where you see us pay our bonded debts. And when we bond for a large public improvement project and we generate annual debt from that, we pay it from this debt service fund. Then we transfer funds from this fund to Fund 58 for our annual project costs. And Fund 58, I call the project fund. It's actually more fun, actually, because we get to work on projects from that. But Fund 58 has a couple of different interesting tidbits in it. It has program revenue, which we're only just beginning to see. Our property assistance program has a revolving loan fund program in it. And so now some of the loans that the Urban Renewal Agency has given out are beginning to get paid back. So we're seeing some revenue come in from that. We also, this is also where you see the transfer from Fund 59. And then we transfer funds out of this Fund 58 to the general fund. And those funds that are transferred out are to pay for planning support of the Urban Renewal Agency. So 25% of the planning director's position, my position, is paid for by the Urban Renewal Fund 58 to support staff time into that agency work. And then it's also Fund 58 is where you will see the annual project allocations. So the debt service fund this year, we are projecting about $604,000 for forecasted property tax revenue. That includes $598, which we current property taxes collected, and then $6,000 in back taxes. And if you look at this, we put this chart together in 2015 to sort of guesstimate where we would be in the increment year over year, so we could figure out some of our projects in that 5-year plan. And in that time, we estimated we would collect about $553,000 in current property taxes. So we're pretty close. We're trending higher than that, which is good. But it also means our 5-year strategic plan is pretty close to dead on in terms of moving things forward. So Fund 59 has the $187,000 annual payment for the Alpine Avenue bond in it. And then the transfer to Fund 58 this year is about $250,000. And then it has $100,000 in it for contingencies. So Fund 58, the priorities that we have in there are 3 big priorities for next fiscal year. One is to continue the development assistance program. That's where we provide grants and loans to private development to either do facade improvements on the historic properties downtown or to incentivize new development in the urban renewal area. This is Pebble Pediatric Dentistry that is currently under construction at the corner of 9th and Lafayette. And we have a grant into them to help build this project and also to build the 9th Street improvements there. They're half of it in conjunction with the boutique retreat. So MURAC has always said in the early years of this program, we want to make sure we're investing in private development so we can continue to build that tax base to fund the public improvements. The next big public improvement project that we've been working on since 2018 is the 3rd Street Improvement Project. We're underway with that right now. There's 4 phases. We're concluding phase B here in the next month. And we'll be starting phase C and D. That's the engineering and construction document phases to build the construction documents for this project so that we can leverage it for some federal infrastructure funds. So in the urban renewal plan, we have about $3 million assigned to this project. And that's not enough to get it done. We think we're going to need about $10 million. And so we are in the process right now of working with different federal partners to see if we can access some of those federal infrastructure funds, but we need the construction documents to do so. And so we're funding $85,000 next year into this, and then the city is also providing $600,000 through their ARPA funding to finish that project in terms of engineering documents. And then we're going to start the downtown master plan. This is something that's been in discussion for a couple of years now, and the downtown master plan is bigger than 3rd Street. It's looking at 1st to 5th and Adams to Johnson, and really thinking about how does this larger area serve McMinnville moving forward in terms of all its needs for Class A office space and housing and retail. And then also we have 2 large nonprofit public agencies, both the county and the city, that own a lot of property downtown, that are in the process of discussing their assets and consolidation of those. Then we think it's a great opportunity to really sort of get behind this and figure out how all the different chess pieces are moving and how they can serve the community moving forward. So that is the urban renewal budget for you.
And Chair Hart, I rushed to get Heather in front of you, and we skipped over the opportunity for public testimony in advance of Budget Committee discussion and deliberation, so.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting us do that.
Good point. So this is a public meeting, and budget meetings do give the public an opportunity to step forward and present testimony. So I would invite anyone in the audience to come forward. No one's, Mark, you're not going to comment on this one? Okay. And I don't believe anybody's on the Zoom call that would be.
That's correct.
No, there's nobody on the Zoom call, and I don't know, were there any written comments submitted? Okay, so hearing none, I would go ahead and close the public comment section. And so no, there will be no further public testimony on this, and we will go into the next item on the agenda, which is the review and discussion by the Budget Committee of the proposed urban renewal 2022-2023 budget. And in light of that, we would first call out a question of whether or not anyone needs to declare a conflict of interest. I would point out that I am a part owner of a property downtown, just off 3rd Street, corner of 4th and Evans, but I do not believe it actually present the type of potential conflict of interest that prevents me from participating in this discussion and voting. So, but I just wanted to get that out, make sure everyone
Chair.
is aware of that. And
Chair Hart,
Chair
comment
Hart,
from the corner.
I should also disclose I'm a board member for Gallery Theater, which is in the Urban Renewal District, but I don't think that will present a conflict of interest.
you make a lot of money off of that?
And while we're at it, I should disclose that my family owns a business on Third and Johnson, basically, which is in the district. But I don't think it has any impact on my decision-making.
And I also operate a business inside the Urban Renewal District and also will not affect my decision-making.
Any additional comments or disclosures? Hearing and seeing none, we would proceed next to the motion and a second and proceed with the discussion on the motion. So I would entertain a motion to approve the 2022-2023 Urban Renewal Project, proposed budget.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nays?
Aye.
I should ask if there was any discussion on that before accepting that, so I'm kind of rushing this. I think everyone wants to get to the city budget, so. Is there any discussion? Does anybody have any comments or questions to either city manager or to Heather regarding the urban renewal proposed budget?
Budget Committee Member Phoenix has raised her hand.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I just had a quick question. I noticed that the beginning balance and ending balance for this year's proposed budget is much higher than previously. Could I get a little clarification on that?
I'll try, and then Jennifer can prop me up with other information. But so in the urban renewal budget, we're working on the basis of moving some projects forward, and some of them are speculative. So we always put funds into development assistance programs so that we can be in a responsive mode for that public-private partnership. In this fiscal year, we actually didn't have as much interest in that. We have 2 projects that are participating in that, but we didn't fully utilize the whole fund for development assistance. So what happens is those funds move forward into the next year and get reallocated. And that happens typically with other projects as well. We'll fund them so that we can expense it if necessary, but there might be times where we're not at the conclusion of that particular project, and it needs to roll over into the next fiscal year.
Is that do you guys have a benchmark for where the beginning and ending balance should be to kind of make sure that there isn't too much of a surplus year over year?
Well, you actually, in urban renewal, you're actually trying to generate surplus so that you can then, do those larger projects that are in the plan down the road. So, I mean, the urban renewal plan is really based on those 13 specific projects with funding allocations to them. And most of them are much more than what our annual increment is. So eventually we'll be bonding for them, but we have to build enough fund to bond for them.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, I have a comment.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to report to this committee that MURAC, which is the Urban Renewal Advisory Committee, meets on a monthly basis, and Walt Gow is our chair. Heather is a part of all of those committee meetings, and I just want, in that they kind of represent us a little bit as an advisory committee of taking care of funds throughout the years. Their discussions are very in-depth. They do a phenomenal job. We have such a good representation of those that have been around for a while and those that are newcomers on that committee. And I'm just impressed every time I go to that meeting that those are where the discussions and where we're spending some of the monies. And they're taking good care of the funds that we're trying to put back into the urban renewal district. So I just wanted to share that. It is a committee that is functioning well and under the direction of Heather.
Any additional comments, questions? I'll make a comment. I was on a committee, downtown committee, I think in the 90s, somewhere in there. And remember, we had this beautiful plan worked out. The planners came down from Portland, all dressed in their black, pants and their black turtlenecks, which was the style for consultants back then. We made we had what we thought was a great package, and we explored the idea of incremental financing. And it was kind of a newer, kind of a scary thing to do back then. And so that plan, like so many other plans for downtown, was put on a shelf and forgotten about. And when I was cleaning out our office after I retired, I found a plan that Jim Craig, who was the founder of my law firm, he was on a committee back in the 70s that had a plan that got put on the shelf and never fully implemented. And so it's really exciting for people who care about McMinnville and care about 3rd Street to see the real likelihood that a plan will be put into effect. It's very exciting.
Chair Hart, can you move your mic closer? The people on Zoom can't hear you.
Can't hear me?
No.
Oh, okay. I heard it was very sensitive.
Only if you say something you don't want people to hear.
Oh, okay. And I promise that'll be the only time tonight that I pull the old timer card on everyone. Okay. Well, maybe not.
It's
only 7:30. Yeah, it's pretty early in the night.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Any other questions, comments? And hearing none, I will point out that my earlier call for a vote was out of order. When you have the gavel, you can do that. You can nullify your own actions, and I will go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor of this budget, please signify by saying
Aye.
Statutorily, we actually need to read the details that are in the motion.
Okay. And you want me to do that?
I would love for you to do that.
Okay. It is moved by Budget Committee Member Drabkin and seconded by Budget Committee Member
Geary.
Geary? Or we'll let Geary have the honor. That the Budget Committee of the McMinnville Urban Renewal District has reviewed and hereby approves the budget for the 2022-2023 fiscal year in the amount of $1,491,107 with no amendments. The committee also approves tax increment for the maximum amount of revenue that may be raised by dividing the taxes for the McMinnville Urban Renewal Plan area under Section 1C, Article 9 of the Oregon Constitution and ORS Chapter 457. So we need a motion. Would somebody make that motion? Because the procedure calls for a motion on that, on what I just read.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Hearing no, it was passed unanimously. And I would now entertain a motion to cancel the continuation of this meeting on both May 18, 2022 and May 19, 2022. So could I have a motion to that effect?
Or just the urban renewal portion meeting?
So moved.
Second.
I'll go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 No one's opposed. So with that, there will be no meetings on the Urban Renewal Budget Committee on the 18th or the 19th, and I will proceed with the adjournment of this meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to use the gavel.
Good.
Okay.
I welcome us to our Budget Committee meeting May 17th, and it may go to the 18th and the 19th, but specifically this evening for fiscal year 2022 through 23. I'm going to ask the city recorder to take the roll. Claudia?
Committee Member Haas,
Present.
Counselor Geary,
Good evening.
Committee Member Maxfield,
Here.
Counselor Minke,
Here.
Committee Member Hart, Council President Drapkin,
Here.
Committee Member Harmon Ferry,
Here.
Counselor Chenoweth,
Here.
Committee Member Phoenix,
Here.
Counselor Garvin,
Here.
Committee Member Ernst, Counselor Peralta, Committee Member Seiler is absent this evening, and Mayor Hill.
Here. Thank you, Claudia. We will now go to the election of a Budget Committee Chair. At the conclusion of the election, the new chair will preside over the remainder of the Budget Committee meeting. I will call for nominations for Chair of the City of McMinnville Budget Committee.
Mayor Hill, I'd nominate Jerry Hart.
Do we have any other nominations this evening? Hearing none, then I'll bring the name of Jerry Hart before the Budget Committee. All in favor to select Jerry Hart as our Budget Committee Chair, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? With that unanimous vote, we will turn the meeting over to Jerry as our chair for this meeting, and this will conclude, it could conclude to go through Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So, Jerry, we turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. And now that I've had one meeting to practice on, maybe
Are you warm?
I'm ready to go now. First order of business would be for a motion to approve the meeting minutes for the May 19 and May 24, 2021 Budget Committee meetings.
I move we approve those minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes. Do I hear any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. The next order of business will be the city manager, who is also our, what do you call yourself? The budget presenter, the budget officer.
So before I make that presentation, Chair Hart, do you want to see if there are any disclosures or potential conflicts that members may need to make tonight?
I would. But that was listed under number 8.
Oh, sorry about that.
Sure, I'll go ahead at this time and ask if any committee member needs to declare a potential conflict of interest.
Chair Hart, my lovely wife Samantha works for the city at the public library, but I don't think that it affects my ability to weigh in on the budget.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Mr. Towery.
Thank you, Chair Hart, Mayor, members of the council, lay members of the Budget Committee. Tonight, we'll be using a little bit different process than those of you who have been around are used to. My budget message will be relatively brief and intended primarily to inform the public record. We will then convene a panel made up of about half of our executive team to present portions of the budget. And we will encourage you to engage us in questions and conversations as we make the panel presentation. We hope that you're comfortable interrupting us. We will pause periodically for feedback and questions as well. We hope to take maybe 2 hours at the most to have this conversation with you about the first part of the budget, and then we will, when we convene tomorrow night, we will convene a second panel of executive team members to go through a similar exercise with you on other portions of the budget. We hope this gives you an opportunity to engage more directly with the department directors and some of our key managers, as well as to ask the questions that you need to have asked. We hope it feels a little more engaging and a little less structured than maybe it has been in the past, but we're hoping for more conversation with you to the extent we're able to do that. And so with that, I will share briefly with you for the public record a summary of my budget message, as well as a summary of the amended budget message that was presented to you late last week. As you all know, having worked with us outside the typical budget season, we started in July of 2021 meeting with this group to talk about the city's long-term structural budget deficit. And we spent a lot of time talking about history. We talked about our expense curve. We talked about our revenue curve. We identified and ranked the core services that are provided in the city's general fund, which is a task that was actually called out in MacTown 2032, the strategic plan that was adopted by the city council about 4 years ago. And that identification and ranking of core services, the direction that the Budget Committee recommended to the City Council, subsequent direction from the City Council, and the context of MacTown 2032 really informed the construction of this program of services that you see. In addition, we were recipients of just under $7.8 million of federal funds through the ARPA, American Recovery
Rescue Plan?
the American Rescue Plan Act. There we go. And part of what this group helped us do over the course of the several months earlier in the fiscal year was identify, rank, and approve projects or recommend projects for approval by the City Council. The focus was in 3 broad areas: efficiency measures that would reduce annual carrying costs for the city, projects that would demonstrate visible investment in the community, and innovative projects that would have significant long-term community impacts. Ultimately, the council approved a list of about 48 projects that would allocate about $6.7 million of the city's total ARPA allocation, expecting that we would have an opportunity to make additional allocations later on. As we were preparing the budget document at its council meeting in March, the council indicated that they would like to see balanced budget, presuming that we delay a possible implementation of a city services charge. The primary reason for that was concern about the impact of that city services charge on a presumed election for a fire district annexation in November of this year. At that time, it was unclear how long it would take to implement that city services charge, and out of an abundance of caution, the majority of the council indicated a preference that we delay that, but that we bring forward a package of revenues centered on the payment in lieu of tax for the electric utility and franchise fees on public utilities to help plug the annual budget gap. The council ultimately took action on equalizing the payment in lieu of taxes for all customers, as well as increasing the wastewater franchise from 5 to 6%. The other actions were not taken at this point, and to avoid significant budget reductions, the council authorized the use of up to $1.8 million of unallocated ARPA funds into this budget. The result was we made a number of changes to the budget document that was presented to you a couple of weeks ago. Essentially, we reduced our ad packages that were included, included a human resources analyst, increasing park maintenance to base level, the summer fun program, the MacPac facilities continuity, and expanded library hours. We also had some service enhancements. The 6 new fighter paramedics were funded by the council mid-year based on higher state reimbursement and other additional ambulance revenue. We have since made a change to that budget allocation. It has been difficult to fill firefighter paramedic positions, and so we have reclassified those positions to firefighter EMT positions, a little bit easier to fill. We did that with the consent of the union, and we are moving towards filling those. That actually resulted in one of the reductions in the budget that was presented to you a couple of weeks ago. We also are anticipating revenue from the nationwide opioid settlement case. It is included in the budget, and much like we did with ARPA, we've essentially plugged that money into Fund 5, and we would propose an approach similar to what the city did to identify ARPA expenses for the opioid expenses. There's also an opportunity to collaborate with other local agencies around that. Another significant change is that recently the City Council enacted a construction excise tax to support affordable housing development, and those new funds, along with some other existing resources, have been placed into a new fund for affordable housing that you'll hear more detail about. I want to thank you for your support and your engagement over the last 8 or 9 months. It was extra work for the council and the budget committee. It helped us inform what, although it's a challenging budget, was a well thought out budget from my perspective. I think that if nothing else, the assessment of core services is a really valuable exercise for us to do. We got the sense from talking to this group that it was valuable for you as well, both in terms of understanding the program of services that are provided by the City of McMinnville, as well as to help us identify priorities and areas for investment in the future. With that, I want to thank you for your attention and your dedication as volunteers to this community. I want to thank the executive team and the whole finance team without whom this budget document would not be put together in any form or fashion that you see. It's a professional and hardworking group, and they deserve all of the credit for this. I would turn it back over to the chair for public testimony on the proposed budget, and when you get to the public hearing on possible uses of state revenue sharing, Finance Director Jennifer Cuellar will help you through that. Be happy to answer any initial questions you may have on the budget message.
Do you want to go to the public comment section before?
Unless there are questions on the budget message.
Just a couple of things, Chair. First off, Jeff, thank you for your revisited message that came out in that we knew we were going to have to do some cutting, and so thank you. I think that gave some very distinct clarity. And Jennifer, I just want to recognize, not that you've put together 2 full budgets, but you've really done a lifting with your department. And again, as we go to the finance department, we see the things that you do. You do the accounting piece, which is a big lift of doing the accounting, but the budget is a big one. And this has been tough discussions that we've had at the council level that have you going from here to here to here to here. And so I just would like to recognize you and your staff for being able to keep us informed as we go through this, and we hope that we will have resolution so we can move forward. Two other things I would like to share at this point. I meet with Jeff on a weekly basis, along with Council President Drabkin, and we talked yesterday that we would be proposing to the council that May 24th, we'd like to visit revenue again in lieu of our discussions here at the Budget Committee. And I don't know what the take on that's going to be, but I just wanted to share that as we go through the process, that I'd like to see us have an opportunity to talk about revenues again on the 24th of May council meeting. And then lastly, Jeff, I mean, it's very obvious to me to look at your budget statements and to look at the components of expenditures. You know, I look under personnel, you know, PERS. It is continuing to go up from where it had been from about the rate of increase continues to go up, almost 4% in PERS in the biennium, and that's just one example. The other piece I did, and I did this on the back, I've got little sticky notes, okay, and they're not even big ones, they're little ones, but I take a look at, we've talked quite a bit, and Heather can relate to this a little bit. You know, we've got a lot of building that's going on right now in the community. I'm not going to talk about the commercial stuff because I think people recognize the residential. And let's say that in 2022, we have 100 homes that are being built in McMinnville. I took my home, I went to my tax statement, and my tax bill was something about 45, and if you get 3% off, it's 43. And I saw how much went to the city. And personally, the Scott Hill family paid $1,495.12 to the city for the operation of the city. We're not a high, we're not a low home, we're right in the middle, I feel. And so if we took 100 homes that are being built in McMinnville and we timed that, if we times what went to the city, that's about $150,000 of increased tax that's going to the city. When you look at the budget, it is so minute to what we're doing. And so when we hear individuals saying, well, we're growing at a rapid rate, and if I remember in my reading, I think it's about 2.8% growth in our community. You know, our revenue stream truly does not hit the needs of this community. We heard from three individuals here that gave us very impassioned testimony of the realities as department heads that are running departments, that they don't have the revenue to do their job. And it's having an impact on the quality of life here in McMinnville. So those were just a couple of thoughts that I had as it related to your budget presentation, Jeff. Thank you for delving, and Jennifer delving into some of the numbers. I think it needs to be told over and over and over again that our expenses are stripping out our revenue increases, and we need to come to some kind of conclusion to allow us to grow this city in a manageable way so that we can reach the desire of our citizens as it was laid out in MacTown 2032. So thank you for just the opportunity to share those thoughts. Jerry?
Thank you, Mayor. So you'd like to go ahead and proceed with the public comment section instead of going to the department heads at this time?
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Gerhard.
And, old habits die hard, so I had to go back and look at the statutes on Budget Committee, because that's what I did for a long, long time. And the first part of the Budget Committee is the receipt of the budget message, and we've done that. And next, the statute says that the Budget Committee is to provide members of the public with an opportunity to ask questions about and comment on the budget document. And so we are going into that phase, and so I would go ahead and welcome any members of the public here in council chambers to step up to the mic. And I do see one hand up, and it's Mark Davis. Please.
On.
Yep.
I think I'll take my mask off for a minute. Mark Davis, 652 Southeast Washington Street here in McMinnville. I've always thought this process is a little odd, and I'm going to throw this out to start. I think there's going to be a pretty wonderful presentation here that would really, provide me with a little more information of what I want to comment on. And I always sort of feel like the public comment comes before you have the information about what to comment on. And I would especially be interested in that $4 million in affordable housing. I mean, I was kind of shocked to see that number and, no details. So, but anyway, I came from the Water and Light meeting. I spoke there on behalf of the proposal to increase the pilot to 6% for everyone in the community. I've been talking to this group for 10 years. As I said to them, I didn't realize I was supposed to be over there telling them that they need to pass the resolution. But anyway, they went ahead and did that, I believe, so I think that's, moving forward. To be honest, I have not studied this budget like I have in years past. I've been, involved in other things and, have not looked at the numbers as closely. The biggest discouragement I have this evening is that I appear to be the only member of the public. I mean, I was here for a couple of council meetings where the gallery was packed with people concerned about taxes and funding and everything else. And, I'm one that argues for public participation, and it really discourages me when this body has an important meeting in which you're going to talk about, where the revenue's coming from and where it's going to, and nobody shows up. I mean, I'm discouraged. But I think that, somehow we have to get citizens involved beyond just a knee-jerk, no, we don't want fees and taxes raised. And I don't quite know how we arrive at that place. I mean, I would like to see a genuine effort to reach out. I mean, I thought this committee did an excellent job of going through and describing all the tasks that need to be accomplished by the city and putting them into various categories. I mean, I thought that was excellent work. I think we lost the public. I don't think the public ever really saw that or understood what that meant, but we certainly lost them when we started talking about raising revenue. And, I have some concerns about the way revenue is being raised. I'm not a fan of the city services fee as it's currently proposed. But, I mean, I think that the public needs to somehow have an opportunity to sit down and look at what the needs are and talk about what the revenue options are. And not, obviously, a formal session like this where you've got to pick up a microphone and come and talk at the front of the room, I think is not going to get a lot of people involved. So, I mean, I don't really have a specific recommendation for you, but I think, pushing ahead with, revenue options without involving the public is probably the wrong way to go. And, I definitely agree that the city needs more revenue. And I guess one other comment, and I hope this isn't taken wrong, but I was also discouraged by the way the process played out in that, at last minute, suddenly there's $1.8 million available to balance the budget. I mean, this is just, it discourages me that when we tell people we need $3 million and then all of a sudden, well, we don't really need $3 million. We can get by with 1.2 and this other 1.8 is going to, I mean, this just feeds the opinion that people have about government, that government is always hiding money from them. And, you know, when push comes to shove, they can always find it somewhere else. And I mean, I'm discouraged that it worked out that way because I don't think there was any intent to deceive the public. But, you know, I'm certain that there's some people who feel that way. And, you know, we need to, you know, put the cards face up on the table and talk about this issue. And that's all I have to say this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? I would note that we did receive 2 written comments, is that correct?
We did.
Okay, and they're part of the record then?
Yes,
Yeah.
we'll be making Vicki Williams and Aaron Butler's emails part of the record, as well as an email that was sent out by Budget Committee member Meredith Maxfield will be made part of the record.
Thank you. Thank you. And I share your frustration. I invited people to the Budget Committee meeting, and I provided links to the budget. People ask where the money goes, and the budget shows where it goes in both everything from incredibly minute detail to easy to understand pie charts with a lot of really good narrative thrown in that is easy to understand and kind of tries to put everything into a historical perspective. So it is frustrating, but it's part of the way the world is. And I don't know how to get anyone interested in coming to a budget committee hearing other than you get it on the back end when people are, you know, raising their fists about where'd the money all go. So anyway, that's just my editorial comment. Hearing no further public comment, I will go ahead and close the public comments section of this budget hearing. And I should note that according to my understanding of the statutes and the way that the agenda has been set out, that there will not be any additional public opportunity for public comment should we go into Wednesday and potential Thursday. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So now is when we have the department heads coming forward.
Not quite. They're very eager, but you do need to do a public hearing on the potential uses for state shared revenue.
Okay. Okay, so we've all been provided with a one-piece paper document regarding state revenue sharing. And state revenue sharing law, which is ORS 221.1.770, requires cities to annually pass an ordinance or resolution requesting state revenue sharing money. In order to receive state revenue sharing in 2022-2023, a city must have levied property taxes in the preceding year and hold a public hearing before the Budget Committee to discuss possible uses of the funds and hold a hearing before the City Council on the proposed uses of the funds in relation to the entire budget. So I would now ask the Finance Director to bring up the city's recommendation for possible uses of state revenue sharing as included with the city's 2022-23 proposed budget.
So up on the screen and in the shared Zoom, there's a single slide. We estimate just over $500,000 in the category of state shared revenues coming in. And we propose that they be used more or less in proportion to the draw on unrestricted resources of the general fund departments. So this is a possible uses of these funds. So if there are any questions, there's just not a lot of detail. I think this is a statutory requirement that comes from many, many decades ago, and so it's, the meaning of this has, I think, been lost a little bit to the ages, but it's a requirement for us to be able to draw on these resources.
Chair, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Jennifer, just for the record, we received the state shared revenue dollars, and then we know what those dollar amounts, and in this case, it's $502,000 or $500,000. Do you go through somewhat the same process as you do with the budget, where you bring your executive team together and you kind of weigh out some of the needs that fit the categories that might fit state statute?
No, we do not go deep in process on this at all. These essentially are unrestricted revenues in actual usage. So they appear in the non-departmental general fund component of the budget. And there is no reporting back requirement by the state. If we were required to report back, then we'd create a bigger process around it. But really, we're required to have these hearings. So that's what we do.
Good, I just wanted to set the record straight so that people understood that it wasn't executive team coming together with those dollars. It's unrestricted to be used as they see fit within their departments.
Correct. And we want to not miss this important compliance step, because then the state of Oregon would not send us our share of a handful of revenue streams, which would not be a good thing.
Yeah. Thank you for that clarification.
So with that, I will open the, oh, I'm sorry.
So the details on how this money is used, that's all in here, right? We read about that here? Okay, that's what I was, so that's why you didn't need to put it in this document, because if we read this, then we know how this money was used.
Correct.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Comments? So with that, I will now open the public hearing on the possible uses of state revenue sharing. So do we have any public comment on the state revenue sharing proposal?
We did not have anyone sign up nor raise their hand on Zoom.
Okay. And I think it would be appropriate to go around the table and see if there's any additional comments or questions that anyone has regarding this. I see all the heads are shaking back and forth, indicating no questions or comments. So there is no testimony, and with that, I will close the public hearing on state revenue sharing. Is there anything else I need to do on state revenue sharing? That's it. Wow, okay. Okay, so this is where we proceed with the new format. And I want to show of hand, who is going to just be totally bummed out that we're not going to go through every page of the budget notebook? Do I see any hands? And with that, I'm being a little bit facetious because that would take time, and at a certain point, I felt like we were just flipping pages to flip pages to get through it before 11 o'clock or something crazy. So, but while I'm joking a little bit about that, it's very important that if you put a Post-it note, I'm sorry, she's waving to me, that if you put Post-it notes, if you wrote down questions, that you take the opportunity to ask those questions. Always before, the department heads would be sitting in the back of the room trying to avoid eye contact at any cost, right? And now they're front and center, and they're all more than able and willing to answer questions, to clear up any ambiguities, questions, anything, because I know this budget document is a big thing and with a lot of detail, And I would trust our department heads to know their department budgets inside and out. So with that, we're going to proceed, and the first presenter is Jenny Berg.
So if I could just do a brief introduction, Chair,
okay.
if you wouldn't mind. While we will have presentations in order, this really is a panel presentation.
Okay.
So it's a collaborative effort. Jenny Berg, our library director, will lead us off, followed by Chief Scales from the Police Department and Chief Lightfoot from the Fire Department. Jennifer Quay, our Finance Director, will join this panel. Kylie Bayer, our HR Manager, will be joining us. She's online, and I will be part of this panel as well tonight. We would encourage you to ask questions as we move along, and we will take pauses between presentations just to see if there are questions or comments from the committee. And with that, honored to work with this group of people as well as the panel you'll hear from tomorrow, and I'll turn it over to Jenny.
Thank you, everyone, for being here and for all that you give to our city. So I requested to the executive team, and no one said no, so here I am, to go first. And in part, I'm wearing a hat as a team member before a library director hat. So the quote that you have up there is kind of my kickoff in this new format, which I want to commend you all. I think the Budget Committee and City Council are very much to credit for this new format and the amount of work and learning that you've put into this in advance. So I want to talk a bit about this format and how I feel that it serves us as a team and as a community. Down memory lane just a little bit, I have to say that this is the day of my 21st anniversary of being hired with the city. Thanks. And I have sat in on these budget meetings for probably at least 12 years, and this is so exciting to be sitting here in this format in a very different way. And one of the things that I think that this format allows us to do is present in the same manner that we work as a team, as an executive team. We are not just our separate departments. We are regularly working together, talking with each other about how to work and provide city services as a whole. And so this format allows for that, I think, to a greater degree than just the library director, the fire chief, the police chief. You'll hear it a little bit, I think, in the presentations, but I think we're also just trying to bookend it with these sorts of comments. So I would like to, quote that learn how to see, realize that everything connects to everything else. We cannot, as a city, both with a capital C and a lowercase c, we cannot be the city that we want to be without all of us working together and connecting. So I think you'll see that in our presentations, and I hope that you, even if you don't see that in the presentations, that you understand that that is how we all operate. Okay, so now putting on just my library director hat, the proposed budget for the library. Go right ahead to the next slide. I'm surprise, surprise, I'm more of a storyteller than a data-driven person. The data's there. You have that in front of you in your book. From some of us, you'll hear more data. From others, you'll hear more stories. To me, the budget is a way to tell the story about what we do. I did think it was important to because the numbers that you're seeing prior to here's our addendum saying that this stuff didn't go through, I want to make certain that my budget summary that is in front of you is a little bit different than what actually happened. So as you can see there in the slide, it has increased, crossed out, because my hope and intention in that budget summary was that we would see increased core service levels, and that is not the case. So we do still have below base in terms of maintain a safe and comfortable space. I'm basing this on the Oregon Public Library standards. We will probably, I've been waiting to up the, it's not really post-pandemic, but a little bit post-pandemic hours to find out what direction things were going to go. Now that I know what direction they're going to go, I can definitely say we will be increasing from our current 35 hours probably to 40 to 45 hours, but that is a decrease from our pre-pandemic 50 hours open per week. That is the standard for the Oregon Public Library Association. I still feel really good about the 40 to 45 hours. And then also building maintenance and capacity, that's just in terms of, we've got an older building and we've got some growing pains there, but I am pleased that we are going to have one-time ARPA dollars put towards some upgrades of the HVAC, not an entire overhaul retrofit, but some upgrades. Base level, offering library materials for borrowing. Why I consider this at base level is because we get, I think, about $17,000 a year from the Friends of the Library and the Library Foundation boards for our basic core borrowing collection. And when you're talking about core services, having things to borrow at the library is a pretty straightforward core service. So that's why I put that as base instead of mid, is because we're still getting some dollars from those organizations. I then want to point out, though, that we do have some great mid-level services offering access to materials from other libraries. That's a fairly standard thing that's happened in the Chemeketa Cooperative Regional Library Service for many, many, many years. I'm excited that we're also putting some ARPA dollars towards an electric vehicle for home delivery. Speaking of working as a team, we have been using the hand-me-down fire department vehicle for our home delivery for the last couple of years. So this, when there are electric vehicles available for purchase, we will be purchasing one using ARPA dollars. Excited about that. And I had planning and strategy at base level, but I moved that up to mid-level because I do feel like we do have the opportunity and the ability to do that, although we don't necessarily, we can have big dreams and big plans, but sometimes staffing and space is not, there's limitations to what we can actually implement. That's my story, and the library doesn't have anything at optimal level service, but optimal level service I think is a little tough because it's always like it's that, big dream, that pie in the sky. You could always do better, right? These are notes, bulletins, comments from the MacPac organization in terms of what we could dream of when you gave out to the MacPac, dream big. This is what they dreamt of for library services. So there you get the story of the library, and I'm more than happy to answer any data-driven questions if you have any. And I'll pass it on to Chief Scales.
I'll ask a question. You said the standard is 50 hours a week from the Oregon Public Library Association. What is your, shoot the slides away, what is your ideal hours a week? Is 50 the minimum standard? Is that the average number of hours? What's the standard relative to minimum service, mid-level, optimal?
If I understand your question correctly, when I look at the Oregon Public Library Division standards, I believe they have it as essential, exemplary, and one other. Essential is sort of like, this is where you should be if you're you're meeting the standards, and that's at 50 hours. So there's, we have lots more that we could aim for. And I do want to say, Pre-pandemic, we were at 50 hours. We had a couple of years at 50 hours a week, and while I was really proud of that happening, what I saw happening with my staff is that was unsustainable, given the staffing levels that we had, the issues with the behavioral issues that we were seeing in those last couple of years. It was just, it was unsustainable with the staffing levels that we had. So that's why we're not going to push back to that level with the staff that we have. But hopefully, I have positive hopes in the future that we'll move in that direction. Does that answer the question? Okay.
So I saw you go. Can I follow up on that? My question was a little bit in that vein, but it changes based on that. So what would it take to create a structure at the library, sounds like of staffing, that would get you to the next past 50, and what would that look like? So it sounds like we're sort of bumping up against your theoretical max, right? And so what does the next step look like?
I don't know if I have an exact answer for that, but I'll go a roundabout and see if that gives the correct amount of information. So one of the things that we did months ago in departments is we sort of made our pitch for our, if we had additional revenue, what would we do, what could we do with it? And I made a pitch, pitch number 1, and then it was sort of like, okay, that's not gonna happen. Okay, so then I made pitch number 2, that's not going to happen. So then I think I said, okay, well, here's 3. Actually, I gave option 1, and then when it was clear that wasn't going to happen, I said, okay, well, here's 3 other options that are sort of incremental. The library is a little bit different from maybe some of the other departments in that, we have part-time staff, we can cobble things together here and there. We've done that for quite a long time. So the answer would be that it could be, the answer is that I have 3 or 4 different options that I could put together to continue to increase the number of hours. And the what you see in the budget that got pulled, the amount that you see was option C, which was the least amount of additional staffing that I had said, hey, we could do something with this. Does that sort of get to what you were?
Yeah. Where do you think we should be?
I certainly, looking at the public library division, I'd like us to be at essential. I think 50 hours is a reasonable amount of time to be open. I believe the entire time that I've worked at the library, we have not been open on Mondays. It's tough to be open 7 days a week, evenings. It requires a lot of juggling of various staffing. And so it's tough. It takes a lot of people to make that happen, especially with the building that we have in terms of the 2 levels and nooks and crannies and whatnot.
Thank you.
Chair. Jenny, just a couple of questions from my perspective. We truly take our hats off to you during COVID in implementing home delivery, because I think that truly engaged our public in the joy of reading and learning when other avenues were cut off, okay? So 100% supportive of that. I'm 100% supportive of you being one of the leading departments when it comes to hot and cold weather and being kind of a stopping place for our homeless. We don't have the capacity in other departments sometimes to do that. So I really appreciate that. But the question I would ask, in being able to do those 2 needed services, how much additional stress and burden does that put on your staff when we are kind of looking at just keeping the doors open for 44 hours, but you have And I'll tell you, working with the homeless is not an easy thing. I mean, you get the whole gamut. And home delivery is not an easy thing. It's just not going out and delivering a pizza. It's different. So could you address that for a moment?
I'll take the warming and cooling shelter first, because that's an easier one, which is that while we are listed as a warming and cooling shelter, my philosophy of it is we're a public library. We're open to the public. The public can come in anytime, and thankfully we do have an HVAC that works. And so by default, we are a warming and cooling shelter. We do not increase staffing or hours during those times. So if it's a hot day, we're closed, we're closed. That's just how it is. So that does not, I don't think that is what requires additional staffing and capacity, but I will say that, what we've seen in the last, I'd say 5 years in McMinnville in terms of the behavioral issues that are here that were not as present previously, that takes a lot. That takes a lot out of staff, and it requires a different level of just being there, making sure that there's people that there's not a person left by themselves, a staff person left by themselves. In terms of the home delivery, I asked that question. I've asked that question of staff, and I think, it was something that Jeff said that I really appreciated early on, which is that the pandemic taught us new ways of service delivery. And that is one of the new ways of service delivery. Yes, it does take a little bit more staff time, but not a huge amount more of staff time. And actually, it is similar to pizza delivery in that we get the delivery ready, and a person goes out and literally it's probably even less than a pizza delivery, because we just leave them at the doorstep. We don't even have to hand off the pizza to the, it does take extra staff time, yes, and that was a choice that we made as a service that we wanted to continue, and, balancing those various things.
I just asked the question just to kind of open our minds a little bit of the little incremental things that you do can add up. And so when we talk about the needed staff, it's not typically across the board. And so that's why I bring it up. I'll ask one last question, and if you don't want to answer this, don't. But, a couple months ago, we did a class and compensation study, and it seemed to me that the library was one of the departments which weren't up to the grade standard of what they do. And, we had a struggle. It took money to do that, and we're cognizant of that as a budget committee and as a council. It was never our intent to not support our staff, from my perspective. But the question that I would have, now that you've been able to deliver that message, what has that done for morale within your staff?
I'm happy to say that staff morale has been very good at the library most of the time that I have been working there. It is a labor of love and a labor of service, although we really appreciate getting paid a good wage as well, and a what, being raised to that level that is appropriate based on data from other locations. And that, and I would say also with staff morale, one of probably the behavioral issues that we face are probably what creates the difficulty much more so than a wage that is this or that. That said, hey, we're happy. It's good. Thank you for that. And I don't have the ear of every single library staff person one-to-one, that they would come and say, well, does that mean that we were, underpaid for a very long time? But I have not heard that. That does not seem to be the talk at the library. It's just happy that it looks different.
Thank you.
Question?
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Jenny, as library director, could you tell us what you would think is your single biggest challenge right now? Is it staffing? Is it safety? Is it COVID concerns? What's the top of mind for you?
Behavioral issues, safety, in regards also to our building. One of my staff members said, "Oh, well, if you're presenting tonight, talk to them about the bathrooms." And I was like, I don't really think this is not the time to bring this forth, but there's issues. It's a pressure point in terms of how they're being used, that we don't have enough of them, the mental health issues that we see, and we're, what a librarian was 10 years ago is very different than what it is now.
I have several questions as well. So thank you for all you're doing down at the library. We appreciate that. How are other libraries also doing this home delivery process throughout the state?
During the pandemic, yes. Post, I actually don't know in that regard. And I would say that it probably depends on the location. We luckily have a community, a town that's fairly condensed, such that we can do it in a, I think that the home delivery takes a total of about 3 hours a day to actually make the delivery. But it is I would say it's a little bit of a feather in the cap service.
And which would bring me my follow-up. How many deliveries on average are we doing a day? Just ballpark.
Right. I don't know that. I think it's about 50 a day, but I would say that the last I looked, there were about 900 people total signed up for the program, but we're not going to them every day or every week or anything like that. We have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday delivery.
It's novel to me because, I'm one that still likes to hold things in my hands, but it seems like we're moving more and more to electronic deliverance of literature, and so I just was curious to see what actual demand exists in a day and age where we're moving to technology. So thank you for that. The other thing I just wanted to make note of is, when I'm looking at these budget numbers, we're looking, and I took out the HVAC numbers out of there because the HVAC numbers we're paying for that out of ARPA funds, so that really shouldn't be part of the budget discussion. We're looking at an 18% increase. So when somebody says we're cutting the budget, that we're really not cutting the budget, and that's after the changes that were made as a result of the discussions we had a week or so ago. So I just want to make a note of that. Thank you.
Just a follow-up, is a part of that percentage increase going to the compensation that we've put in? I mean, we dealt with that differently, and so to talk about not cutting services when the council said we're going to add equal pay that every employee would like to have, what does that relate to?
Right, I would say that we have not increased our FTE at the library. It's really about the cost of personnel based on the classification and compensation.
So for clarification, the numbers are 1.5 hours increase in FTEs. The difference in salary went roughly $250,000 of the $400 and some odd thousand increase we have. Okay.
If I may.
Go ahead.
I think that 1.5 increase is not what actually ended up in the budget.
According to the numbers, it's 16.56 is what you had in 2021, 2022, and 18.18 is what you have in 2022, 2023.
And the 18.18 is what I had hoped to have, but it got pulled.
It got cut.
It got cut.
In the,
That's not,
You got to be looking at the
the
updated
updates.
thing.
well, I have the updates on the dollar amount. The dollar amount is 2653,024, right? 2,653,024.
That, the 2653,024 was what's in the big book. That's been reduced in the
Proposed budget in front of
amendment
us.
that was sent out.
So the
2494, 658. Right, buddy.
So that's 100 and, I thought I updated that in this spreadsheet. I apologize.
The updated-
So what's the new FTEs?
You're going to have to,
Yeah, so I think what the point, there's 2,494,658 is the current amount. And if you back out the ARPA money.
It's 160 out of that.
That would be comparing apples to apples at that point, right?
Which would still be a sizable increase from last year's budget, and still probably about 130,000 above the increase in salaries that occurred. I just want to be clear, because one of the misnomers that's being driven here is that we are cutting, and that's not happening. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up.
We may be cutting the increase.
I think Ginny had a follow-up comment.
Yes, I agree with that. That we are at a hold the line in terms of hiring. Yes, we are not cutting, and if anything, we're better off than we were last year because we're not taking furloughs.
I believe Remy had something.
Yeah, I have a follow-up. Recently, as you'll recall, Councilor Garvin and I were able to do a tour of the facility, and you showed us your office spaces, many of which were constructed out of, I don't know, were you using the books that there was no room on the shelf for to make the walls of the offices? It looked something like that. I guess have a almost maybe sarcastic comment, which isn't perhaps best, but it did occur to me in this conversation that if we funded more full-time employees, you literally would not actually have anywhere to put them, which on the not sarcastic part of that comment then is just continuing our thinking down the road, right? So when we're looking at this and we see the number of things that are not being funded, it's not only your staffing, it's really the long-term planning that's been going on for how the library will operate. And I think that I think we'll hear this a lot tonight, kind of these different interpretations of how we look at the budget. I also really, I loved this document that you sent out. I told Jeff the other day, but I thought that this budget that we got with historical highlights and just all of the storytelling that was layered through it was phenomenal. I wish that everybody had read this budget, and because I really feel as though it showed how historically both the citizens and the leadership of McMinnville have invested in assets, trusting that those that came after them would continue to invest in not only those physical assets, but the relationships and the staff, and maintain the investments of the past. And not just with the library, but throughout the budget document, I think that was something that screamed loudly out, was that we're not taking care of the investments of our past. And certainly we saw that on our library tour when we saw, that when we saw the situation that librarians are needing to work in without adequate workspace, without privacy, without really appropriate heating and cooling, and a myriad of other differences. So I underline that right now just because, your presentation was wonderful and has a lot of information in it, and it doesn't even touch upon what's not happening with MacPac and how we're actually starting to solve some of the problems at the winery, or at the winery. Those two words are very similar. At the library, not just bandage them. And I do have some, I am curious, although I don't need to take any more time, everybody's time right now with it, I am curious as to how the OPLA comes up with the standards. Like, is that you look at your population or you look at your service area and then determine, is it based on usage? If you have any, I'm curious, although it has nothing to do with my decision-making, but I'm interested in how the OPLA suggests this number and then how we find ourselves meeting that standard, or what is the standard based on, I guess, is my question.
Do believe that it is population-based in segments, if that makes sense. So if you're, a population under so many 20,000, then the essential level of service is less than from this to this. But I think it is also a fairly large window. Not window, it could be a 30 to 100,000.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I have a comment. Can I just talk?
Go ahead.
Going off what Remy said, I would be an interesting idea if we condensed the budget messages without all of the numbers, but the stories, and made it more palatable to give out separately. Like my friends who want to know, all they hear is that I'm reading a 600-page binder. But if I could say, here is just some of the stories so you can understand what I'm going to go spend my time doing, that'd be an interesting idea, even if we just made it available online. And then say, okay, well, if you're questioning, you can also read all the numbers too. Does that make sense?
Great idea, thank you.
Anything else? Virginia? Chief Scales?
Be very afraid, especially after my last public comment at the, to the dais. I'm not nearly as nervous this time, so bear with me as we get the PowerPoint set up. And I'm not the storyteller that Jenny is, but I can wow you with pictures of cute canines and a handsome officer, Josh Eckroth, right there. This is, I'm going to be beginning, this is a little bit, I've only got a few of these left. I really do. And this is probably going to be one of the coolest things that we've done. And when Jeff mentioned it actually last Thursday, hey, let's just kind of change the format up, I was obviously hesitant because I'm a concrete black-white person, But this is good. It's stretching me, and I'm able to tell a story. I want to weave into some of the stuff that Jenny talks about. We all are. We have been historically siloed, in our departments, and our ability now to tell these stories, both budgetarily and just our everyday work that we do, the good work that all of our departments do for the city. I think it's highlighted because, as you all remember, when I began as chief in 2014, I was roaming on the back row, hopefully getting internet service. But now I'm engaged with you, and I'm able to tell you a little bit more about what's going on at MacPD. So I'm first going to start off, next slide. Part of our responsibilities, both police and fire, is we have to build an emergency communications budget. And that budget is what's used to fund our radio infrastructure, as well as pay our city dues to WICOM. And is this going out, or can you hear me still? Okay. And so part of that is Fund 15, our Emergency Communications Fund, which Councilor Garvin sits on the board of WICOM. And this past year, they have decided to restructure the dues. So we will see a $116,000 reduction for our fees to WICOM because of this recalculation of the fee structure as well as increased 911 tax revenue that WICOM gets. They've been able to pass that savings along to us and make this more palatable. Last year, it was hold the line. This year, again, you're seeing an even bigger reduction, so thank you for getting that done. I think Rich and I both are appreciative of that, as is the finance director and the city manager. We continue to have debt service payments thank you, debt service payments for the upgrade of the police radio frequency. As you may recall, we did a finance plan for that. We continue to pay for the radio equipment. And then also, good news is there's no large projects or replacements on the horizon, and our equipment is whole there. Does anybody have any questions about the Emergency Communications Fund specifically? I bored you. Congratulations. All right, let's go to the PD. Okay. Hey, and as I go through the slides, please don't take anything personal at all. I'm serious, because you guys all have a difficult job. You really do. You gotta mesh what you have and the departments have, and we gotta make it work. And some difficult decisions had to be made. So, but I will say, through this difficult budget period, last year specifically, where we got hammered, the fire got hammered, everybody got hammered. This is to Councilor Chenoweth and to everybody's, we are adding some stuff back, the PD specifically, because we weren't held harmless. We had to hold positions, but this budget's a little bit more, there's some opportunity here. So a couple things that we talked about is I wanted to talk about what MACTOwn 2032 talks about, community safety, resiliency. And one of the tenets is to provide excellent, exceptional police services. So we're continuing to look for that grant. We're not looking for it. It opens in June and July of this coming year. And it's a federal grant to fund the body-worn camera project. The body-worn camera project, as you all know, is something that's extremely important, not only to me, but in policing in general, and the transparency within our communities, to make sure that everything that we do say is captured on video. So the hopes are that we're going to have some sort of an award here this coming fiscal year. It was in the budget last year as revenue in and revenue out. It's basically budget neutral, but it is back in there again, and this time it was up to about $600,000. This is a 100% federally funded grant, so whatever we do get, it will be going out. Okay, so it's, go ahead.
Does that just fund the acquisition of them, or like the ongoing?
Well, it'll depend on the cost of whatever is awarded. So it could go, it will, the way we budgeted it, if we are successful in this entire grant, it will fund the 5 years of it to include storage, et cetera, all that stuff. It's just not, it's the equipment and the infrastructure as well.
Okay, so the only thing you're on the hook for is the staff time to redact.
That's correct.
Okay.
Councilor Garb made a good point. There is staff time to redact when these do come online, redact the videos that the public may request. So yes. We are also back in the business of doing traffic safety. It's a big thing for me. It's a big thing for y'all. I think probably 50% of the emails that I get from either other department heads or yourselves is about traffic issues. We're going back out and getting grants that will subsidize our overtime for DUI, speed, seatbelt, and then distracted driving, such as your cell phones. So we've asked for about $16,000 in grants for that from the state, different varying states. And then lastly, this has been a partnership with Municipal Court and Jennifer's. We're actually seeking out and sought a grant for an automated fingerprinting machine. It's a 90-10 split where the feds pick up 90%, we pick up 10%. It's a live scan machine, and what that does, it'll allow for it'll essentially make our work much more efficient. We're able to get information back about people that are wanted potentially. It's going to be a pretty cool thing. We're about 15 years behind the curve here. We've been doing ink prints for forever, but that again is something you'll see, and I think it's going to provide a little bit better service to our citizens. Next slide, please. Yes.
On traffic safety issue, do we use in the city at all any flashing speed signs, like the mobile speed signs that move around?
Yes, I know David Renshaw's crew has a cadre of those that they will go out and they'll put out in problem areas for public works, and they can get that information posted and they'll get it put out, and we share data back and forth.
Yeah. What's the high score on that? That's a joke. That was actually...
The high score was you in high school, Councilor Gardner. Still, congratulations.
Record holds.
The grants, can those only be utilized around like federal holidays like Memorial Day and Labor Day, or can you use those whenever?
There'll be some that are in conjunction with travel days, but also it's a lot of free time as well. So yes, there'll be stuff that'll be mandatory. You have to work a time around this holiday, not necessarily on the holiday, not Memorial Day, but Labor Day, that sort of stuff. You know, holiday weekends, that sort of thing. That is sometimes some of the requirements of the grant.
Is that grant paid like per citations written, or is it just a
It's a flat amount of dollars.
on the road?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I thought you were saying, we have two, and I was like, yeah, I read that also. We have two of those. We have two. It was in the budget even, because we just got another one.
Yeah.
So we have two of the flashy.
I think we're up to
speed signs.
4 total.
4?
I think
Okay,
we're
we
4
have
total.
more.
Yes. Very popular. There's probably a month waiting period to get those lined up. Okay, let's talk about priorities for this coming year. As I mentioned, this was super important. And thank you to Jeff and Jennifer and the council, where last year we did have vacancies that we held throughout the year permanently. Those were baked into the budget. This year, we will add that FTE back in, and we'll also add in that one part-time office specialist. I'll tell you what, our record section, there's 3 of them. And they're sideways. I'm not saying anybody else isn't sideways. I guarantee you, everybody else is sideways. But we generate a lot of paper at the PD. So adding that one part-time office specialist will certainly add some capacity up there in that front, who are meters and greeters. 2 canines we've continued to add, and thank you, Jeff, for allowing that to continue. You may have heard one of our canines, Jack, that was up there with Corporal Eckroth. He passed away about 2 months ago. And then previous fiscal year, we had another canine, Axel, that passed away. And these 2 additions, one is being partially subsidized by canine donations that we had stored in that fund. So we'll expense the rest of that, and then we'll bring on these 2 canines as the year comes through into probably, well, it's going to depend upon staffing, so we'll talk about that, I'm sure, a little bit later. But long story short is those 2 canines will be super important to our community, as well as increased training for our officers, which had been, we slashed training, and that's probably, as you can imagine, a huge liability that I see when we're not out there training and we're not getting staff to training, we're not getting the updates. So the ability to go back to pre-cut will help us tremendously. And then lastly, I want to talk about the priorities for this year. You all have heard and continue to read my updates, and I'll get another one out this week, is our RV abandoned vehicles, not our abandoned vehicles, but our RVs, our lived-in vehicles that you guys worked so hard on over the past couple months to get that code implemented. 8.36 is we have identified, and we had a great conversation with Mr. Towery on Friday. We're going to be moving forward with a public-private partnership with a storage lot that is going to add our capacity to hopefully effectively deal and store and comply with the state law and state statute and municipal code about storage of these vehicles. So those are some really kind of key things that I see happening this year so far.
And Matt, just to let you know, I was out at Mackwater and Light for our commission meeting. You had 2 officers, well, you had 3 officers, 2 vehicles out there, and by the time I left at 10 to 6, there was a visible difference in what was going on, but it had grown when I went out at 2 o'clock. It looked like the old Marsh Lane.
Yeah.
It was so bad, but.
So to your point, it's like 4 steps forward and then 3 back. It seems like, and the new statute didn't allow, we lost ground and we're gonna have to make it up. We anticipate schools gonna be shutting down. We'll have Officer Height back in the fold. He's gonna be continuing to do our homeless liaison reach out. We'll have him going out as we move closer to implementing that. We're going to give these folks ample time to come into compliance. They're already well-versed, but to your point, sir, yes, I know we have seen the slide back, and so has our staff.
Couple questions. The canines, are those both detection canines, or is one of them
No.
detection?
Yeah, thank you. Detection canines, we still have one. And I made the choice not to add another detection canine. They're both going to be patrol dogs. And I say this of not just, I think it's out of fact, is that ballot measure 110 has made it really difficult. You no longer have crimes for narcotics necessarily. I don't think it's a wise investment. They do great work. Do not get me wrong. I love Tucker, but I think having 2 drug dogs right now didn't make a whole lot of sense, but patrol dogs do because our calls are more dynamic, all right? We're having more interaction. We have more people flee, whether it's in cars or on foot, what have you. Having that capacity added to our ranks is going to, I think, benefit us more than a drug detection canine.
And the last slide was more staffing based, but I didn't see anything on SROs. Are we going to maintain position in the schools?
Yeah, so that'll go to the staffing piece. Yes, as you know, right now, 2 of the SROs were sucked out of the schools, and they're working in detectives because we have a staffing shortage. Officer Hyde is in the high schools. The plan is, again, we'll continue to have discussions with the high school and the school district. They were super supportive and understanding of our situation. The plan is to put them back in the schools again. Both will be back in there.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Any other questions?
Oh, got a couple more slides. I know I talk a lot, Mr. Hart. So a couple things that were not funded this year, replacement of high-mileage patrol vehicles. This is going to be the second year we haven't done it. Usually we're adding 3 a year. This year we're adding none. So be mindful as we move forward in budgets. At some point we're going to have to pay the fiddler, and it's either through a ton of money in repairs and maintenance, or it's investing in the new fleet. So FYI. Same thing goes with our detective vehicle. We have a vehicle that's probably 15 years old. It still has 4 wheels, but that's saying a little bit. That's probably a little bit. Sorry, I'll shush. And then MDTs for our patrol vehicles. This year we had slated to get rid of all our old, outdated, unsupported MDTs. This year it's just not doable. Capital funds didn't allow for that, and we're going to be pulling it.
MDT.
Mobile data terminals, mobile MDCs in our cars. There are computers that connect us with dispatch. All the good information that we store in our office comes to that. And then lastly, HVAC. You've seen this, maybe not, for about 6 years. There's an HVAC compressor replacement. We still have 2 that work. There's 3 in total. 1 got pulled out of capital improvement. So that's that slide. Next, please. Priorities for 22-23. Okay, this is where I don't want you to take anything personal, all right? But, so, we talk about what city departments, we continue to struggle recruiting and retaining our staff. You all may have heard, either through the grapevine or my communications to City Council, the Great Resignation hit MAC. I mentioned that in my presentation a couple weeks ago. We're down 6 right now. We only have 43. That includes me. So, you start grinding into those numbers, and 2 of the people or 3 of the people are currently training. So as you go, you're going to understand that we've got to we got to cobble our resources. So if I can tell you, this is the #1 issue that we're going to see in policing until I retire, specifically at MAC. I guarantee you from the rest of my tenure is we're going to have a tough time recruiting. We're going to have a tough time retaining. And in addition, the recruitments of those officers take a ton of time. So I want to just say that we're seeing a lot of turnover. We're seeing those people that are, and it may be the great regret, who knows, but they're leaving the business. And they're leaving the business for the private sector. Staff consistency, or consistently, we're working from behind as we're in the staffing time. We're in this crunch. We're putting out fires versus being proactive, providing services or programs which we've adopted through the core services discussion and through the MACtown 2032. We put ourselves out there, and we want to go there with y'all, and we want to be doing the good work that you all expect of us and our citizens expect of us, but we are consistently battling time. We are seriously battling time and resources. So I'm going to give you a quick example. My take on this, traffic safety and education. I preach this to our command staff. I want to be a big boy police department, okay? I want to be the best service that we can provide to our citizenry. Our city our size should have a traffic safety component, a unit, designed to address the stuff that you all and I see. Whether it's Riverside Drive where we had an auto pedestrian killed, whether it's a person right outside the police department that was tragically, a little kid that was struck on a bike. I mean, these are the types of things, if I could sit and tell you how many people run that light at 2nd and Adams, it will baffle your mind. And it's right across from the police department. So what's going on in your neighborhoods? I can only say it's got to be worse. So to that point, I say those are examples. We need to expand and talk about, have those difficult discussions about where we see the PD in 5 to 10 years or next year. Crime Response Unit, an outstanding thing that we launched. We saw a great deal of success, reduction in crime. Burglary rings were shut. We had to shutter it because we don't have the capacity, that ability, that bandwidth to continue into those, to continue to have those people on those teams that get sucked into patrol and detectives to do the core functions. And then lastly, like I mentioned, we're basically 100% reactionary. I want to be proactive. I want to be the chief that everybody goes, God dang, Mac PD, the city of McMinnville, we're doing stuff the right way. 10, 15 years ago, I promise you, this was the place to be. It really was, Mac PD, and now I got people leaving to go be a farmer? What? No, it doesn't make any sense. We need to add and understand that we need to be the best that we can be. Overtime costs are climbing. Staff burnout's real right now. So I'm just getting, I'm not sugarcoating anything. I need to be cognizant of that. 6 years ago, our detectives came in and talked about staff burnout. We added that. You know, those are impactful. These are humans. We bring them into this profession and we break them. I don't want to be the chief that breaks people, right? So food for thought. Again, this isn't jamming you up. I'm not. This is just me talking about our budget. And then last slide. I'm just going to end with this. We need to be the sought-after destination to work. We're at a critical juncture in our city's history. We truly are, in my opinion. So from MPD, our other city departments, I want to challenge y'all to find and look for that sustainable funding mechanisms that are going to make our city, we're great already. We got a cool city. People love to come visit it. But I'd love to be able to provide the best service and look people in the eye and say we're doing the best that we possibly can, and I can't in my heart right now. So at the end of the day, I'm going to be there working with you. I will. I'll be right behind you. But to that end, thank you for your time. I hope I provided a little bit of clarity, and hopefully I didn't bore you, and thank you.
A question. You mentioned that you're losing officers to the private sector. So I was under the assumption that losses would occur to other forces because, you know, maybe Mac's not paying enough or we're overworking them or whatever. So how much of the retention issue is the salary issue versus burnout versus, you know, whatever else is going on?
That's a great question. I guess I should call you Budget Chair Hart. Sorry.
You can call me Jerry.
Yeah. I truly think it's a combination thereof. Okay, there are still people we're losing to Albany PD, to other PDs that have different programs, have bigger, more opportunities. There is a compensation component for sure. There's also the private sector pays more than the public sector in some instances where these folks are gravitating to. So to that end, it's not all just people leaving the PD to go to different PDs. I'm going to tell you, when I got hired 30 years ago, there's about 200 people for one job. I got a hiring that we just opened up for, 10. And I got 6 positions or 7 positions I'm opening up. That's reality of policing in 2022. So the draw isn't there. I'd like to make it like the cool place to come work again. Yeah.
You used a term in there that I hadn't heard before, the Great Resignation. And I looked it up. So that's nationally in 2021, there was a 45% increase in police officer retirements compared to the previous year. And then again, the following year, that increasing. So that's hitting everybody, basically.
Yeah, it's not Mac specific. I use that term. It's a phrase that HR Director Kylie has said, and I will tell you, I don't take credit for it. Yes, it's happening. People are leaving the profession. It's not fun to be a police officer. It's sometimes we're under the microscope, and we know that's what we get in for. You know, it's. But to your point, yeah, people are leaving the profession. We don't keep them in. We don't want to break them. We want to set up these things, these programs that we have internally already, peer support, officer wellness checks, workout facilities, which we've all got. We've all got. We just need to change that culture and change the, the positivity.
I have another question. I'm noticing that some jurisdictions that are having significant issues with homelessness are investing in more mental health services in their police department rather than staffing additional officers sometimes to take those calls. And I was curious, I know we've had conversations here. I'm just curious where if that's part of the thinking on a year timeline.
So the ARPA funds, and I'm sorry, I feel like we're going way over where we were kind of like, we were saying, maybe take 10 minutes. Probably not going to hit that mark. Sorry. To your point, ARPA funds, we got money allocated to take a look at what McMinnville would look like with programs for mental health resources that pull the police officers out of that, sort of the cahoots model, remember? Might not work perfectly in McMinnville. There's money set aside. Now, the problem is that we want to be an island. We can be an island because we're the ones that funded it. YCSO, Yamhill County did not fund anything. Newburgh-Dundee tried to. They didn't fund it. To Mr. Towery's point, I know he made a mention in his budget statement. There's discussions about other resources that have come in through the opioid settlement. See, I said it right, opioid settlement. I struggle with that word. That may provide us some bandwidth to take a look at solving that in a much larger structure, whether it's multi-jurisdictional, so yes.
Yeah, I just wonder, it seems like if you're having a challenge staffing, and if it's a persistence challenge going forward, I just wonder if it could be part of the, not this year, but down the road, maybe moving some patrol staff into more of a mental health role.
Well, that's, Tim Height Officer Height is doing that for us.
Yeah.
Outside of it, but no full-time. We don't have any full-time, but to your point, yeah.
And I don't even mean an officer. I mean, yeah. So thank you.
I have a follow-up on that. You said we'd be an island if we pursued that with YCSO and Newburgh-Dundee not funding. So in that, in the island scenario, do you have concerns that means people would flock here for,
Sorry, that was probably a bad, not an island like they're stuck here. I mean, like we would be an island in that our resources, we look very focused myopically on one place versus, hey, we've got more resources through Newburgh-Dundee, through Yamhill County, obviously a ton of resources in the mental health game and other resources. COSs that deploy with our officers every day. COSs are community outreach specialists that are mental health specialists that try to de-escalate during difficult times that people are going through. We get them de-escalated. But to your point, sorry, that was not an island like they'd be stuck here.
No, I got that. I understood that you meant we would be an island of service. I guess my question is more, what do you see the effect of that? If we're operating that way as this small city in this greater complex of Yamhill County and with these adjacent law enforcement entities, but only through our police department is this happening? Does that make sense in terms?
Yeah, I've never been a fan. I don't see, I see it very difficult. I know Eugene has done it. They siloed it and they do it just Eugene and Springfield. Candidly, they have way more resources. To that point, I would say that Mac alone as a standalone, trying to, puts piecemeal things together, that doesn't, I don't think, it may. That's why you hire a consultant to say, does it even work? But I don't see that as a long-term solution, in my opinion, unless we bring other partners in.
Can I can add a little bit to that too, Councilor Drabkin. I think that the chief's primary point was it's going to be difficult to create the critical mass to really support a program like that alone. It's not just a regional problem, but you have to really knit together enough resources to have an effective program. And it's not the kind of program that would draw additional challenges to the community. It's not the kind of service that would cause people to come here or to act out more. It's really a matter of being able to have the partners on board so that you can have a sustainable program that serves a regional need.
And well, yeah, thank you for the clarity. I did understand that having this other layer through the police department wasn't going to cause people to come here for services, just for the record. But I think what I'm not understanding, and this isn't out of a place of advocating at all, just also to be clear, what I'm not understanding, and maybe I'm starting to understand, is that having this island of services doesn't work as well because, say, for instance, our partners like YCAP are more regional, right? Is that why you're saying the doing this without having, say, Newburgh-Dundee also offering or having similar type programming is less effective? That's what I'm trying to understand, is the less effectiveness of being a community that has that layered in, or what. I understand the great complexities of addressing the mental health crisis in America. I mean, not any more than anybody else, but I understand that it's an exceptionally complex issue. And I'm the part that I'm not understanding is where the difficulty is in being the leading community in that versus being part of a group of communities that are doing it at the same time.
Yeah, I would say Matt can be a leader. We have to have the funds, and we've got to have the willpower to follow through with it. So I'm not saying if you want to not throw, that's not the right word, but if you want to put money towards that project, do I think it adds value for the community? Absolutely. I also think that there's a great benefit from bringing those partners in to layer those services. And the ARPA project that I talked about is simply as a consultant coming in to take a look. Is it even doable? And if it is, who are our partners? And how do we get those partners on board? They may say you need multi-jurisdictional partners. We're not Eugene. Well, what do we do there? Well, we got to piggyback with the city manager to those other communities to really pull them into that solution.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Following up on that, I, at one point in time, thought we were already heading kind of down this path, that there were some discussions going on. Where is that?
Discussions with respect to
putting a program in place that was connecting Yamhill County and Newburgh and us.
I guess how many, I had multiple conversations with the chiefs and the sheriffs. The chief and the sheriff both, well, I will just say that they were not funded. They either weren't given the money through ARPA. I know it was there were ARPA requests. So it sort of fizzled to that. When I say it's fizzled, the ARPA money's still there. I just want other partners to come in and help us, solve this regional problem here. Get police out of those types of situations to the people and get the services wrapped around those individuals that need it. So yes, those conversations have and continue. We were on an email chain last week, and I'm happy to be there, and I know we'll have a meeting set up with our counterparts, reference this sort of discussion with these other funds that have come in since.
Okay. Just so I know you know this, but I'm a huge supporter of that, and I would love to do whatever I can to help push that forward. This other question I have, and you may not want to answer this, but I'll throw it at you anyways. I can understand from an internal perspective that what we can do to try to make policing a more desirable career path. But what do you think has led to this? I mean, we didn't used to be here, and now suddenly across the country we're having this problem. It's not just a McMinnville problem. I mean, you read it in the newspaper. There's cities that have lost 40% of their police department, and not just because of defunding, but because police don't want to work there. So how did we get here, and how do we fix it?
Well, I think and this is a philosophical, that we may be getting way into the weeds here, but I will just say this. Everybody here on this panel, whether it's the budget committee or the city council, we appreciate your support. We truly do. You have, you've been there for us. You've been you passed along, hey, great jobs and thank yous, and that's going to be, the support from the city is helps to pull these people through those difficult times. At the end of the day, I can't compete with media, social media, all those things that go into really stigmatizing what we're doing nowadays in policing. So, pandemic didn't help either. So to that end, I will say the support of this body is going to be crucial, pulling all our staff, not just the PD, but everybody in the city through these times, through these difficult discussions. So to that end, the support, the championing for us, all our staff, not just the PD, everybody. Our officers will truly appreciate that, though.
Thank you, Chief. And just so I know, because it's not in that packet, the addendum that came out, so your numbers for employees, FTEs, are staying constant from what they were last year to this year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
I have another.
Anything else for the chief?
I do have one follow-up. I want to touch back on this. Obviously, the cahoots type model is not in this budget. I understand that, so I don't want to drone on about it. I just do want to bring back my recollection, which is that a model like that, and please, anybody correct me if I'm wrong on this, but that model, when we were looking at it and we did those work sessions, they didn't actually reduce your budget. What they did was improve the morale of your department, correct? If that's something we think about in long-term planning, it's not that this is it would not present itself as a budgetary adjustment. It would be.
That's our conversation has always been, we're not pulling money from the PD. What it's going to do, if we do move on these types of things, I guarantee you, I've been to staff meeting after staff meeting after staff meeting. Chief, when can we get out of doing the mental health calls? Yeah. I say tomorrow when we can make this happen. Tomorrow, let's plow through this. Yeah.
That's invaluable.
You mentioned that the support of this body is helpful to your staff. Do you mean just in saying thank you, or do you mean literally by funding you more?
I believe that properly funding departments to a level of service that we all believe that we should be providing services to our city is crucial. The thank yous are great. The funding levels are what's going to, again, I'm going to use the term, pull people through that keyhole. Truly, it's the funding levels.
Thanks. That makes sense to me. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding.
That was my question exactly. In fact, better phrased. Dang near.
There you go.
Good evening. I wanted to start by having just a small conversation about revenues. There was a period of time where we were looking for alternative revenues a couple of years ago, and we tried to make do some work with the care homes and some issues that came up within that process. The resulting election, as well as quite frankly, what I was just at the fire chiefs conference, the leadership of the city to try and draw attention to the challenges that we were facing with the care home industry in their misusing 911 services, had resulted in a negotiation at the state level and legislation that just passed. And as a result of that process, the state has now hired a state EMS coordinator for EMS and care home interface. One of the dialogues, I haven't had a chance to brief the city manager on this. I just met with the gentleman yesterday as a result of that. And one of the dialogues is that McMinnville is in the front queue to work with state EMS as well as the care home group. I know it sounds kind of hard to believe after my last interface with them, but to start working with the care home group as well as the state EMS agency in working through what's called a community paramedic program. The community paramedic program from the state EMS offices that we just spoke with could be very easily tied into a CAHOOTS program and have some additional funding sources outside. So as we're looking at opportunities for partnering, it might not just be our own local partners, but other ways we can peel monies from the state agencies that impact service levels across the board. So I'll just leave that on side note from the discussion that just happened, and I'll jump into my analytical and numbers presentation because I'm not the storyteller that Jenny is. So in MacTown 32, we are working through this budget to strive for a May election in the new fire district, which falls under the city government capacity. We have been in 2010 was the first foray into districting and consolidations and preliminary discussions. In 2018, we brought the concept to the city council for approval. During the 2018 presentation, there was a lot of discussion. There was a lot of support for the concept. We've kicked that off and have moved through that process. But one thing I want to kind of refresh those folks' memories that were on the council at that time and the budget committees during that time frame was the council made a statement, a bold statement that said, that's a great idea. We should look at doing that. We believe that's in the best interest of the fire service in the long run and of the city, but we have to build a bridge to get to the district. And that's the one thing that we've missed in this process and moving forward. We haven't built that bridge to the district. The parts that are coming down the pipe as far as the fire district will be community engagement, education, and we're working with consultants to help us through some political strategy processes on the backside. The identify and focus on the city's core services, the core service work that was done by our entire staff, which was a huge monumental lift of our crews to not only categorize and evaluate and arm wrestle each other with the processes through the process, but just to create a process that had not been done. You couldn't just go out and say, hey, tell me how to do a core services thing for the city. The work and effort that was put into that process, I just have to compliment our team on that. It was an outstanding lift and big lift. And so the work, I want to keep referring back to that as we move forward because the amount of energy and effort that your staff put into developing that work for you to have some ideas on what the impacts are or not on your financial decisions. I want to make sure that we kind of keep that in the forefront. And so that work said that our call volume continues to increase. Our fire and ambulance services are identified as below base. But also, as a result of that work, the ambulance improvements were authorized, and I'll kick to that into the next slide. One of the things that we've done in our core service investments for this year is increasing our EMS service from below base by adding 124-hour ambulance into the system. As Mr. Towery spoke, that challenge was the funding for that system is coming from the GEMT funds out of the CCO. That is our reimbursement from the federal government for Medicaid transports through the coordinated care offices. So that is it was a 5-year project to get that funding stream in legislatively. It was finally approved 3 years ago, and then 2 years ago we were working through the state administration. So this year we just received the first payments for 2021. Those budgeted increases will be covered by the 2022 dollars in the budget. So what this budget does is maintain 6 firefighter EMS positions that were authorized by City Council last year that we could not hire because we could not get paramedic firefighters in the door. One of the challenges that the police department is facing that I think, and I'll say this in broad scope, I don't want to steal anyone else's thunder, but public services in general are struggling to find employees, and I say public services, I mean government services, are struggling to find employees and to retain them. In my world, the 1980s was the boom time for the communities in the metro area. They were hiring and hiring and hiring and hiring, and now they're retiring and retiring and retiring and retiring. The colleges that were putting out 2 and 3 classes a semester for paramedics and firefighters are now putting out 1 or 2 classes a year for paramedics and firefighters. There used to be lines of people trying to get into those classes. They now have vacancies in the classes once they start. So across the board, those are some of the struggles that we're facing. That's from my perspective. I know Matt shared his. Part of those funds, one of the allocation items was $200,000 with the GEMT funds to refurbish one ambulance, and one was the authorization using ARPA funds for $250,000. Now, the one thing that is not covered that were increases within our budget, either through GEMT funds or ARPA funds, obviously our personnel costs as they go up with existing staff due to cost increases and COLAs and benefit packages. But we are a high fuel use system. We put a lot of road miles on those vehicles, and you all know what's going on with fuel costs. So our fuel costs have 50% increased across the board as we're moving forward. Have you been paying attention? You notice what's going on with drug costs in the world, and we are a high user of pharmacy drugs and narcotics in our delivery of our services. And what used to cost us 30 cents or 50 cents for Narcan now costs us $12 and $15 for Narcan, just as one example. And that's not even, I mean, that's a prescription drug, but it's not a prescription drug. You can get it at the pharmacy if you went up and asked for it. The other thing is we have had significantly high turnover in our senior ranks of our operational staff. In the last 2 years, we've lost 3 battalion chiefs and 3 captains, or promoted captains into battalion chiefs. So there's a training increase in our budget compared to previous year, which was one of the items that was slashed last year. And that's specifically because of the risk that those individuals are responsible for out on the street and maintaining our fireground safety and operations. And we have to get them up to speed. And we have processes and systems built inside the organization, but we also require outside certification levels and training to get them qualified and ready to perform those positions without oversight from administrative chiefs. Some of the items that were not funded due to the revenue reduction, command staff vehicle for our training chief, or for our operations section, and he was going to get the hand-me-down before you get it. We had CPR devices that were, we had in each one for each ambulance that's in the system. Those are automatic device. So if a lot of we run ambulance service to 450 square miles around the county for the budget committee that may not be aware of that. Everything from Gaston down to Polk County and to Marion County on Dayton side. So we're out in the field with our crews alone without our engine company or our battalion chiefs. And if we're having to do CPR on a patient out in that area, that's what those devices were designed to do. We can strap it on their chest. The one medic can still manage a cardiac arrest while the other one drives to the hospital. So those are cut. Training tower pavement repairs have been long time part of our ongoing maintenance issues that have been deferred. And then I called them MCTs because I want to be different than Chief Scales, but they also are the computers that are in our vehicles that we have on a rotation to keep them current for current software and software and hardware upgrades, so that we have a large fleet, so we try and rotate them out so we don't have one-time costs. But as Matt said, as they defer, we're going to end up having a bigger one-time cost somewhere down the road. So McMinnville Fire Department, our organization has been the poster child for recruitment and retention in particular. We've lost 18 individuals in the last 2.5 years. We've run a significant number of hiring processes. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Employee losses continue, and this is not about the fire department, so let me take a step back. Part of this is in the slide because I'm speaking on behalf of the team. As we move forward. So I just want to kind of make sure I can speak to my concerns, but I also touch on others' concerns in here. So as I'm bouncing back and forth, I want to make sure that we all understand this isn't just about me, although I like it to be. It's not. For the city, employee losses continue across the board. Workload due to vacant positions or insufficient staffing is overwhelming staff and becoming problematic and creating a lot of stress on the employees. Uncertainty around city revenue is encouraging employee resignations. Last year's furloughs, a stopgap one-time payment for for vacancies or for staffing, and not having a definitive plan for sustaining revenue impacts people coming into the organization or wanting to come into the organization. People pay attention to what's going on. Our applicants pay attention to what's going on, and sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot with our own social media on some of the things that are out there. But when we're talking about recruitment of professional positions, can you just go ahead and switch the slide for me? Planning and engineering and attorneys and senior staff members and directors on the executive team. It's very difficult to recruit people into a position where the city just had furloughs last year, and we're using one-time stopgaps to pay for personnel costs. That's uncomfortable. You don't know what you're getting into when you walk into those roles, and I'm just speaking the truth. That's just the way it is. The lack of HR staff support restricts the number of recruitments that can be accomplished. The fire department alone ran 14 recruitments last year because of the number of vacancies that we had. Recruitments, a recruitment for the fire department includes everything from the advertising block to the 30-day recruitment window to physical agility testing to written testing to personnel interviews to assessment centers, and all of those take staff time on top of that, on top of the HR time. So it's not having enough HR staff support to be able to manage those recruitments. And I know in the last year, that's in the last year in the fire department, I know throughout the city, we probably have had double that many recruitments, and many of those processes are very similar. So for one person to try and manage, and in addition to bargaining and all the other stuff that goes on in the HR world, that's a huge, huge lift, and it eats a huge amount of staff time. So recruitment and retention is killer on our time, to be focusing on the things we should be focusing on rather than running recruitments and running recruitment processes.
Chief?
Yes,
Thank you for that
Yep.
slide. You mentioned something that, that Amanda mentioned to me in her exit interview. I interviewed her when she left, and I just had questions.
I don't know what you said. Okay.
No, one of the things that she said that was really surprising to me was we were talking about the city attorney position. And as you know, we had 2 city attorneys previously. We went to a contract attorney for one position to David was the city attorney. And in her exit interview, she said, you know, Wilsonville has 2 city attorneys, and that actually helps us, you know, it helps with my work-life balance, her work-life balance, I should say. And so that was a factor, or, you know, one part of her decision. And I said, well, you know, that's interesting. But she said, you know, and I just didn't think that we'd get a second staff attorney because there's other needs that we have on the executive team or in that, in that group before we add a second attorney. And I said, well, what are those needs? And she said HR. That was the first thing she pointed out. And we hired Kylie, was the first HR person that we had, I think, just 3 or 4 years ago. And then now to hear, you know, I felt like we added capacity within the last 3 years. And now I'm hearing that we need a second position, and I believe it, based on what you're telling me in terms of recruitments and everything else. I don't know, I just wanted to acknowledge that because it was a bit surprising. And what she said is when you hand over all of these responsibilities into one person for an entire institution, it becomes overwhelming, and it is adding to the workflow. So I just wanted to ask a couple of questions, and this could be for anybody in the panel. But you're describing, I think everybody across the agency is describing high turnover, lack of people coming in through the pipeline, a lack of certainty with regard to the revenue. And candidly, these government jobs are very competitive right now.
That's correct.
Hard to find, we don't have enough city planners, we don't have enough engineers, attorneys who are willing to work for what they pay city attorneys. So I just want to acknowledge those are all challenges, and I am, you know, very sympathetic to the idea that we need additional revenue to address the problem. I sometimes express frustration when we come to wages and benefits, but the fact of the matter is when you have a high turnover and you have a low talent pool and you have staff that is feeling incredibly stressed and put upon, one way to address that is by increasing compensation to make sure people are aware that they're appreciated. And in the case of the library.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Sorry.
In the case of the library, it seems like people were very significantly underpaid, as with some of our other divisions. So this was a pretty big correction for us in this budget this year. And I want to, I think we should acknowledge that, but I also acknowledge that clearly we have more work to do to get a stable revenue stream, and I'm committed to helping you with that.
Please do not take anything I said as contrary to what the work that has been done. From my perspective, some of the challenges that we deal with in fire are our proximity to metropolitan area, but it's not because of our wages on the fire side. I mean, we're relatively competitive in our fire wages for the union people. The real challenge for us is workload, and as the workload goes up, the exodus moves those folks out the door, and we are not Portland Fire and Tualatin Valley Fire, and we will never be that size of an organization where they have 20 captains opportunities to promote into and those types of things. And we acknowledge that, and we would have some turnover as a matter of norm because of that. But it really is right now just a matter of the workload issues for us. And I also know that the support of this council moving this towards the consolidation effort goes a long way, if we can be successful with that in the long run, to help address some of those issues. So please don't think that anything that I just said is contrary to that.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just did a quick search online for open firefighter positions in Oregon. There's 110 across the state of Oregon. So I can imagine that probably compensation is not going to be a driving, we're not going to be able to compete with that problem going on, no matter how much we increase the compensation. We need to make sure we're competitive at some level, but we can't get into at least from my perspective, I don't think we can get into a wage war. We're going to lose that war one way or another.
That's not what I was advocating for at all.
Yeah.
We've lost 3 to Portland Fire here in just this last run, and that was not wages.
So one question I would have, you made reference to us going to a new approach on the fire or on the ambulance side, bringing in employees that are going to be a little, for lack of a better way to put it, less skilled to man one of the ambulances. How do you see that helping in taking care of this workload, or will it help in this taking care of this workload issue?
Yeah, thank you. It will help with the workload issue. Currently, the fire department runs 3 24-hour ambulances that are both firefighters and medics. And so if there's a fire, the ambulances go, they jump off, they can fight fire. If there's an EMS call, one of the ambulances will be assigned, and they go out and get ALS treatment. What we are doing in the revision of our structuring of our deployment model is we're switching or adding the 4th unit, which council authorized, to be a basic EMT basic firefighter position. We have 7,700 calls, EMS calls a year. Our focus for this vehicle will be within the city limits, because that's where the majority of what we call our BLS or our lower level acuity calls are. 50% of our calls, of the 5,000 calls we transport a year, are BLS or lower acuity calls. So we will have 4 units in the system. 1 unit is going to be BLS only, and the YCOM does triage. So our dispatch center, they call into the dispatch center, they do the triage, they break it out in an Alpha or Bravo or Charlie Delta Echo, Alpha, Bravo, or low, and the other ones are high. If that basic unit is available, it will take the basic unit call first on all basic unit calls. That frees up an ALS unit to not be tied up, to be using a higher level unit on a lower level acuity call. We're getting more value for our dollar, and we're freeing up the other unit to make it available. So that's the concept behind the new deployment model. We'll put the right resource and the right type of call at a reduced cost.
And in theory, we're going to end up having more trips that we're billing for at the end of the day, which also should help bring more revenue. Is that correct?
That's correct. It will make, because we have the 4th unit in the system, we will not be calling partners as much to cover calls that we need to cover them on, and that there is 150,000 in additional revenue based off of that principle.
So the combination of those questions kind of lead me to where I was kind of mulling in my mind that I think we're looking at because of, I hate this phrase, but because of the new normal with staffing that we're seeing across the board in all industries. I mean, it's hard to find employees in almost in any industry you're in these days. And that is, we're going to have to be looking for creative solutions to try to bring the workload down because we can't win a wage war with every other municipality in the state. And so I just want to commend you, A, for coming up with a solution on the ambulance side to try to find a way to bring the workload down in this approach. And B, I would encourage us to keep looking for such solutions because I think that's going to be one way out of the problem we're facing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Couple questions. One, specifically, in my time on council started sort of right after the district sounds good. Let's start rocking and rolling. But not saying I don't buy into that and agree with it. But tell me a little bit more about what was the bridge going to be or needed to be when that was made, that pledge, right? Build the bridge to the district. And I don't disagree that perhaps we've failed to do that. So what was the hope that it was, and where are we off, and how could we get back, or is it, where are we at on that?
Well, so the dialogue at that time was a citywide dialogue on the challenges with the revenues that were going on, and the cost versus revenue issue that we're dealing with currently, but several years ago, which was what drove the conversation about being able to get the fire department into a district. And we knew that it would take time to get to the district, and we knew that it would take time, even with a successful vote, to get the district up and running. And we also knew that revenue expense gap was rapidly closing, and we would not make if we would not make it if we didn't do something to stop that gap closure. And what was there were conversations about everything you're talking about now to fill the gap, but there was nothing identified as the specific one that was the one we should move forward. Does that make sense?
Yes. So it was.
It was identified as part of the reason of support for the district. One, to help the district be sustainable and be able to provide better fire protection services, and two, to address that gap that was occurring, that we were not going to, if we stayed together without doing the bridge, we would run out of money.
Yeah.
For lack of a better term.
Yeah, so perhaps the bridge, and what I'm hearing you say is the bridge was more of this, resolving to get to a district someday isn't the end-all, be-all. We still have to take care of house to get us there and cover that functional, the reason to go to a district is not going away, and we need to address that while we make roads towards the district. That was maybe what I'm hearing you say is the bridge.
So I don't want to speak for council, because that was the council's dialogue of creating that bridge. That was not my dialogue. I don't want to imply that I know what council was intending by that discussion.
Okay, that works. And then a second one, maybe for both the chiefs. The sworn. The sworn positions, right, and the protection that you guys sort of both talked about the challenges associated with remaining competitive, and I've heard that it's not merely a throw more money at it problem. It's not a wage conversation. It is a how can we be more dynamic and be attractive in ways that aren't just throw money at high dollar positions. I feel like I pulled that from your presentations. Am I correct?
I would say you're right. I mean, compensation, it's work-life balance, it's being able to have flexibility to do proactive things and put programs into play that make the community better, the PD, offer our employees to stretch themselves. So your point, no, you can't throw money at it to fix it. That's not going to fix it. At the end of the day, it's going to be about how we engage our employees and how we value them and and cultivate them and provide them opportunities that they might not have in a different PD for us.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, oh, go ahead, Chief.
Oh, that's fine.
And Matt, specifically from your presentation, what we've heard is that it would be more effective to take actions to inject more services and with the revenue actions to support that.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you, the PD, we are, public safety is a priority for the budget committee and the city council. I do believe that. I truly do. I want to see us do something super special in this community. I really do. Others have really struggled throughout the years funding positions or getting positions added. So at the end of the day, I do understand, and I kind of went off on a mind meld there, but I just want to say that I recognize that the council and the budget committee supports the PD. I want to do everything to make us take that next leap. I truly do, not just as a PD, but as a city. Sorry if I kind of went off a tangent. I get very passionate about this stuff, and I know, sorry, Jeff.
All good.
You said, speak your truth, Matt.
Do you guys need a minute? Or
I did say that.
Chief, did you want to? I feel good. I don't know if you had anything you
Feel good, that's all that matters.
I feel really good. Thanks, Chair.
Anytime. Anything else?
Right, go ahead, Jim.
I think Jennifer's up next. Thank you. We all appreciate it. What?
Yeah. Duly noted. Right.
So I've got a string of items to share with you guys, and the first I think is, one of the more interesting parts that I'll be talking about. It's the municipal court. So in terms of our core services, just starting next month will be the first time that we've got our new judge, our new court supervisor, and we're working to move back into having in-person court appearances, probably starting with the criminal docket, and then we'll see how all of that goes. But we've learned a lot of positives out of COVID in terms of how to provide alternative ways for folks to interact with the court, and we don't want to lose that. We're not looking to go back to the way it was before. We're looking to find a balance between in person as well as continuing folks, giving folks the opportunity to appear before the judge virtually. There just was a lot of upside to that. We're also looking at timing for reopening City Hall to municipal court customers. We're on a little bit of a slow walk of getting a renovation done there. That's being funded by ARPA dollars. And, it's the same thing that folks are facing around the country in terms of materials and timelines and that kind of thing. So that's just delays there. But we also, our priorities for next year out of the Muni Court is continuing to strengthen our relationships with other city departments, with the legal community here in town, and also with local nonprofits, because we too see a really important role for us in terms of supporting the folks who come before the court who are facing substance abuse or mental health challenges, and figuring out how to hook them up with the help they need. So for us in the municipal court, what's challenging due to the lack of sustainable resources is just there have been fairly recent changes in Oregon law in terms of limiting the ability to suspend driver's licenses. From a policy perspective, this is absolutely the right thing to do for all kinds of reasons. But it does have an impact on our fine revenue, and you'll see that the fine revenue for the municipal court has been declining through COVID. We'll see if things change when we're kind of steady state out of COVID, but I anticipate it will continue to kind of flatline or maybe even decline a little bit more. We're also looking at, it's a best practice in municipal finance not to be budgeting fine revenue as a programmatic revenue source, because this can create really weird and bad incentive structures in municipal organizations. Just Ferguson, Missouri is the poster child for this type of problem. So in particular, expecting for courts to fund themselves is an incentive structure that disproportionately affects the poor in the community. And that's the opposite of what we're trying to get done. So there's more work to be done in those areas, but that's on our radar screen. We also want to, allied to that is begin talking about funding the municipal court more on its own merits, and potentially looking at moving that fine revenue just out of the municipal court component, just so that it's not part of the conversation of why aren't you covering your costs. So for us, we have strong aspirations associated with MacTown 2032 strategic objectives for advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. Look forward to working with the DEI committee in the upcoming year. And we've been, thank you on behalf of the municipal court for your choices in supporting us with a couple of ARPA projects. Mentioned the remodel work that is ongoing with City Hall, but also there was dollars allocated out of ARPA to help us reduce the backlog of municipal court cases, and we're part of this year's staffing structure, and part of next year's is benefiting from moving one of our clerks from a 3-day-a-week position to a 5-day-a-week position to help us deal with our backlog. So I'm sorry, I'm the finance director. I had to put the numbers up right. And it's teeny tiny type. That's really a shame. So, so where the main variances are is associated with increases are associated with the ARPA projects. And then we also, in addition, part of our kind of coming out of the almost austerity-like approach that we took to last year's budget, we too are increasing our training resources. We also are looking at new communications applications to try to drive down failures to appear and that kind of thing with, if we can, automated email and text kind of reminder messages for appearances. So that's on the docket for us to be looking into next year. And I think, yep, that's the last slide for Muni Court. So any questions or,
I have a couple. I forgot to ask the chief in my ongoing wanting to know FTEs. What is your FTE actual numbers after the adjustment? Is it still the number that was on the last mail out? Because there was in the update we didn't get FTE changes.
Right, so that includes 6 new positions, but it also accounts for some vacancy time that.
So the 50.18.
Those numbers are going to be off. You know, I mean, it does include the new 6 positions.
So 50 is roughly okay.
Right. Yep.
Okay, and then yours is roughly okay for MuniCourt for FTEs.
yes.
As what we got. Perfect.
Yeah, the the difference between, there were no capital investments associated with MuniCourt or finance, as well as there had been no investments, core service investments in terms of moving from base to mid-range or that kind of thing. So in those two departments, the difference between what you have in the large book and what is part of the updated proposed is essentially the same.
That's all your questions right now?
My only question with MuniCourt, I'll wait till some other day. It's not really.
But why? Because you keep bringing it up. I think this is an appropriate time to ask the question.
Now I'm totally curious.
Well, one of the questions I have, Amanda kind of shot me down a little bit on this because it's going to take some more work than I was expecting. But is the potential of working with the county court and closing MuniCourt, and being cooperative with the county court, and we're looking at areas where we need to cut the budget. It seems like this is one area that we should be looking at. And so what does that look like to you? The concern that Amanda brought to me is that there is some language in the charter that points to MuniCourt, so it might require some charter work, which would mean an initiative to get rid of it. But is that something that we could be looking at? Is that the question you were hoping I was going to bring up? Well,
That's the question I've heard you bring up.
Yeah, I mean,
Other times, I thought this would be an appropriate place to ask how that would.
If the council was interested in making that happen, how would that unfold, and how could we do that?
Well, and I don't know the issues you're talking about that Amanda drew your attention to in terms of, I know it's in our ordinances discussion of the municipal court. I'm not sure where it is in the charter and whether that would need to go to a vote. So that would make it a more complicated thing. But communities have looked at doing this, at closing municipal courts, because they aren't required to do, and there is a state court system. There's a circuit court. Currently, there's a division of labor that's negotiated between the DA's office at the county level and our operations here in terms of the kinds of misdemeanors, more than anything, that come before the community court, the municipal court, relative to what's happening at circuit. And I know where I was before at Columbia County, the city of St. Helens, for budget purposes, considered closing its municipal court. And it was actually the county DA's office and the circuit court out there that was most alarmed at the prospect of that happening. So it would be something that really important conversations would need to be taken place. I think the impact on funding or the ability to save funds at the city, even though fine revenue is coming down, and I just talked about the importance of delinking that from the court, the net gain, because there is a reality that there is a revenue stream of fines that would then go away, you certainly wouldn't gain capacity at the level of the cost. It would be the difference, right, between cost and fine revenue, which is, let's see.
$204,000.
Right, so it's not a tremendous amount, but absolutely, it's something that could be discussed. But you'd want to bring more jurisdictions into the room, for sure.
I have a question about that. Chief, what would be the implications of that for policing if the city were to, first impression kind of?
First impression's a bit messy, obviously. There are certain things that we do, the city ordinance violations, there's code compliance stuff that goes through court, and I know it's been changed up a little bit. Candidly, to Jennifer's point, our DA's office and circuit court obviously would have to be in that conversation, and that's a big ask. I mean, we put a significant amount of cases into municipal court, just by volume. So that impacts their ability to do things as well. Over at circuit court, that certainly would impact them.
What are the main kind of cases you're running through Muni Court?
Misdemeanor properties, misdemeanor person crimes for the most part, minus assaults, probably like high-level or mid-level assaults. Obviously, domestic violence goes through there.
DUIs.
DUIs go through there. All our traffic crimes go through municipal court, with the exception of a handful that might have impact in circuit based on the entirety of the call. That might just go over there to begin with, but large volume of traffic crime.
So we'd likely end up having to do some kind of a contract with the county or something to have them, if we wanted to do something like that, because we'd be asking them to take additional workload.
Well, I could certainly say yes, and I know Mr. Barry is, he's tight on DAs, so it's tough. Their workload, we generate, we're the largest city in the county, we generate quite a bit of work in municipal court.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Counselor Peralta, can you move your mic closer to you? Sorry.
Thank you very
I'd like
much.
to acknowledge that is the fourth time I've been asked to do that tonight. I'm so sorry, Claudia. I will do better.
Thank you.
And just for the record, Council President Remy sent me the language that's in the charter. And I do think it's probably going to take an initiative or something similar to get around this.
Yeah, so I'll just note that the charter does in fact require a municipal judge and a municipal court. It also vests the authority to decide the scope of that court to the council. And so the council really decides what work the court handles. I think one of the things that we would be required to do to really explore that, what it would take to unwind that knot is what was the legislative intent behind that language when it was added to the charter. Was it an expectation that it was going to be a traffic court? Was it an expectation that it was going to deal with misdemeanors? And so sort of what the voters had in front of them as a description when that language was put into the charter is going to really determine kind of the breadth of the council's ability to shrink or expand the court's authority. And so it would require, I think, significant research and significant work, also engagement with our partners. It isn't work that has, risen to the level of any sort of priority on our work plans, and it would require that sort of discussion with the council to understand what the impact on work plans would be. And it would go beyond just finance and the municipal court team, obviously.
I hear minimum a year out in that description. Minimum, and that's, our workload's pretty heavy already, so it may be more than that.
Thank you for bringing the question up, because I have heard you bring it up twice, and I've heard other councilors express interest in it as well. And I do think this is a perfect scenario. We have, we have all the department heads literally in the room within our city that would be directly affected and could address it. So thank you for bringing it up, and thanks for all of the input.
You're welcome, although it did take a little prodding.
Okay.
Get used to it. I'm all about transparency. Let's do it.
So here we go. Finance. Come on, do that right. So, the finance department, our core services and MacTown 2032, where our priorities are, it's, we're attempting to do a little bit of a reorganization internally to build out more analytical capacity in the department to better serve the organization. And I, just in the last couple of weeks, had a couple of requests, one from Public Works to look into some analytics for the airport and kind of running different scenarios there. Also trying to support the Parks Department. They're doing some really amazing work rethinking what a funding structure might look like. And we just don't have the capacity to support them to run analysis in a timely way that is meaningful for them to be able to make good decisions on their programs. We have traded out with we took the opportunity of a, I guess, great resignation opportunity where we lost an accountant, but we hired an analyst. And the incremental cost, it was a slightly higher, more expensive skill set to buy. But I believe when we complete our reorganization, we'll be in a much better position to be able to support management type analytics, as well as hopefully a little bit more transparency, fiscal transparency, and resources for you all as governing body. We're also continuing to try to add efficiencies and strengthen our internal controls, really leaning on our existing software to maximize its abilities and try to reduce the amount of handwork that we're doing and rely on systems to produce our data. And actually, speaking of systems, thank you so much, Mayor, for calling out the finance department. And there was a tremendous amount of work that went into this budget cycle. It's been a unique one. And so all of the work that Rhonda Gretzen and Chris Seacrest in particular have put into turning around numbers and looking at new scenarios, it's been heroic on their part, while also keeping up with their day jobs. So let's see, in terms of the American Rescue Plan Act, the Finance Department, we have, yay, on board the grant project manager, and she started maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and so we look forward to creating a better infrastructure for people to be able to get their own projects going, turn around information on status of where we're at with projects, how things are going in terms of burn rate, helping folks plan, helping folks project manage. There's a lot of opportunities that we're working hard on. And I guess specifically one of the things that I'm concerned about in terms of, the finance director and being an advisor to you all in terms of your decision making is by choosing to put 1.8 million of ARPA funds into just general operating. That's not the best match for that unique once-in-a-generation funding. So I'm concerned about what that means for the sustainability generally of the city, but also the impact that we hope to have with those ARPA dollars will be diminished by this choice, and that's unfortunate. Then in terms of what are our challenges and
To that point, Jennifer, about ARPA dollars.
Yeah.
We only lose those as we spend them. So if a revenue source is identified sometime between now and the end of the fiscal year, if we only have spent 800,000, that remaining million can be back in the ARPA fund discussion, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And I hope that will be what happens ultimately. So,
Thank you.
I want to make a comment because on that point, and it also relates to the court comment that you mentioned. I guess I should preface it first off by saying, Jennifer, this has been the best year for budgeting and process and that I've had, at least on this council. So I appreciate your work and your staff's work, and I'd like to recognize, how much of your time and your staff's time and the management team's time has gone into this process. And I'm very appreciative. I mean, it's been a lot more work for us too, but
Yes,
I think hopefully it'll be a good thing at the end. That said, I'm going to throw out one criticism, and I hope people take it in the spirit that it's intended, which is that I've heard a couple of times since I've been on council over 5 years, different times when people will say something like, that's only $200,000, or that's only $400,000. It's not that much money. And I feel like, sometimes that might be true. Like, it might be true that it's not worth changing the municipal court significantly over $200,000 if that means a significant loss of service, for example.
right.
But those $200,000 increments add up. I mean, that's a lot of staff raises. That's a lot of, so I just encourage people to not be real glib about those kinds of amounts, because they do add up. And I say it because I've heard people make comments like that in the past, like it's only $400,000, it's not worth going to do that. And I just feel like we're fighting over trying to come up with $1.5 million, and sometimes you need to hit singles as well as hit home runs, from a budget standpoint. So I just want to put that out there in terms of how we talk about the budget. But so anyway, that's the criticism, and in light of an overall very positive, budget experience.
Okay. So I think I've mentioned some of this, the challenges for that we see in terms of the lack of sustainable revenue. It's I classified most of finance's operation. Our conclusion on the team was that we were functioning at a base level, and it's kind of when Jenny mentioned. Optimal level, that's like dream big and out of reach. For me, I felt we were at base level because, things could always be worse, right? So the below base is if we had one person less or two people less, that's what below base would be. But one thing that is happening that's a reality is that basic work gets pushed back. So, for example, our monthly closes because we need to address more pressing issues. And so we're always balancing the importance of keeping just the day-to-day, the monthly rhythms on track, and then managing fires or big projects like the heavy lift around sustainable resources and, this particular budget cycle. And there are also, the unanticipated kinds of things that have happened, such as COVID. And then the great thing is there have been grant programs to help us make it through, but then the grant programs also have administrative work and reporting requirements and additional things to take care of, and so we become more and more stretched. And so I'm also concerned about just over the years, the calls from council of wanting to have more financial information, more timely information, more, different, looking at things from different angles. And it's been disappointing to me not to be able to deliver that for you all in a meaningful way. And then the other impact of kind of operating in this way is that when all of the departments are stretched then the forward-looking departments need to be able to rely on the support services departments even more when they are stretched. But when we're stretched, we're not able to fill those gaps, plug those gaps. And it's hard for folks who really want to do the best possible work for the community to have to say no, I can't get to that, I can't help you. It's hard. And so in terms of our financial summary, just we have a slightly higher, well, not slightly, our personnel costs are higher because it's driven by two things. I mentioned the staffer that is a slightly higher skill set that was replaced, and then my time is no longer 15% for the court, it's 10% for the court, so that means more of my salary is showing up in finance. And that's because I'm able to do that because we have hired an amazing court supervisor, and just the team in municipal court has just been great, working through the pandemic and all of those needs. And then we also have in finance, the ARPA position is in finance. And so that's a limited duration grant funded position, but it does make our FTE go up. But that'll be a short-term thing. So that is finance.
Are you moving on to the transient lodge at this point?
Yeah, those are the next ones. You want to do a time check?
I just wanted to do a time check. We're at 9:10. We had this scheduled from 6 to 9. And so the question that I would put to the committee, do you want to continue to get this part of the panel presentation completed tonight, or do you want to defer it to tomorrow, knowing that we have 3 hours scheduled for tomorrow and then potentially 3 hours on Thursday? So what's the druthers of the committee?
I would like to finish the panel presentation part tonight, so these panelists don't have to come back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, my question to staff is, do you have a full 3 hours expected for tomorrow night?
No. No, I think we'd expect to spend maybe about 2 hours or so with a similar panel presentation, although this is heavier in terms of the number of people. Tomorrow's panel is a smaller number of folks. I think that 2 hours of panel discussion is probably what we do tomorrow, leaving more time for deliberation and decisions by the group tomorrow.
Clarification on that, how many slides does Heather have? Yeah, I think so.
David Renshaw you have to worry about tomorrow.
Oh.
I can do it in 2 slides. I'm showing
Hi,
that.
Heather.
Heather's paying attention.
You woke her up. I do have a quick question on the financial before we move, regardless of what we decide to kill it or not. My same question. On the FTEs, you showed an increase of 1 to 5.9. Mm-hmm. With the adjustment, do we still increase by 1 to 5.9, or are you holding steady?
Yeah, there is a new grant manager,
okay,
but there are no more additional positions.
Thank you.
Kelly, do you have a question or a comment?
No, I really don't. I was just kind of curious to see what you're deciding you're going to do.
I think we're proceeding on. Is that right?
Okay.
Okay.
I can only stay 1 more hour, so I'm just telling you.
All right, so here we go. So this is just a lineup of one slide, well, mostly one slide per fund. So the Grant and Special Assessment Fund, this one has 2 slides. This is where the Downtown Economic Improvement District has its special assessment. And you all will be in June, it's re-upped every 3 years. And this June, they will be before the council talking about the new renewal. And the MDA, the McMinnville Downtown Association, we've just found out, would like to look at increasing the rates. So that'll be another decision. And so this budget was based on an assumption of them not increasing their rate. So likely it'll end up being a supplemental action that takes place sometime next year. Then there was a lot of movement around American Rescue Plan Act dollars. So we can, this fund holds those dollars until they're going to be used by the operating department that executes them. So we'll continue to be having supplemental processes, I think, probably throughout the entire duration of those dollars being on board. So just heads up about that. Then in terms of the updated proposal, it did change substantially. And that's due to creating the Affordable Housing Fund that will be on your agenda actually next week to formally do that. But because of the establishment of the Affordable Housing Construction Excise Tax, that's a restricted revenue that needs to be running through a special revenue fund as opposed to going through the general fund. So it just makes sense to group all of the housing-related activities and grants in that new fund. So that's the main thing that's pushing that difference. And then we did add back the I can't say that word either, opioid settlement dollars into the Grant and Special Assessment Fund. Then we've got TLT. So at this point, we're looking at the 30% share of lodging tax next year is estimated to be over $500,000, and I think that may be the first year that will happen. So that's over the years become substantial, and I think Jeff mentioned that, I think, in his presentation to you all on the status of Visit McMinnville, if I'm not mistaken, seeing some of the impacts of that work. It's not just paying dividends in terms of the economic growth in the tourism industry, but also it's paying dividends in terms of, as Councilor Peralta pointed out, every 6 figures here, 6 figures there starts to add up, and that's what's beginning to happen with TLT as well. Then there's the Telecommunications Fund. So this fund is a portion of cable TV subscribers' franchise fees go to the Telecommunications Fund, and that supports McMinnville Community Media, who, as we speak, is broadcasting this meeting on our neighborhood, our community television station, which is pretty awesome. So it's a real important piece of our engagement and inclusion priority in MacTown 2032, assuring that local cable channel opportunity is still available for folks here in McMinnville. Then, I hit the wrong button. let's go forward, not back. The debt service fund. So all of the voter-approved bonds that we have at the city of McMinnville are housed in the debt service fund. So this is important because what we're paying debt service on right now is the construction of this building, the police department, as well as the transportation improvements that were more recently passed throughout the city that I think this budget will end up being the final year of spending out those proceeds. So that's moving forward. Let's see. I think there's, one more. The insurance services fund. So we use this fund to pay out property general liability and our workers' comp insurance in this. And these basic risk management instruments, they support the strategic objective of strengthening government capacity, and it just having proper insurance, it facilitates the work of every department throughout the city. And I think that's the end of kind of those little guys. So I don't know if there are any questions about any of those.
Did I see in the packet that we just recently moved to SAFE for?
Correct.
So how long has that's a recent change to SAFE?
Yes, this fiscal year that we're in now, 2022, is the first year, and CIS got out of that line of business. So it turned out not to be an option, but I think it's been fine.
Did we ever, not as a dependable line item adjustment, but did we ever get returns from CIS on workman's comp? I ask that because in my personal experience with SAFE for workman's comp insurance,
you get rebates.
You often get significant monies back.
Yeah, no, CIS didn't have a program like that associated with it. So I think we will be eligible for that, but it may take a couple of years of us being a part of their system to be able to participate in some of those dividends, which are not for sure. Every year their board gives them out. But yeah, the county where I was at before, we were SAFE clients, and they were good partners.
Anything else? Any other questions, comments?
All right.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so you've got Kylie on the screen now, our HR manager. She'll, I think, share some specifics and maybe reinforce some of the larger themes you heard earlier as well. Go ahead, Kylie.
Claudia, could you add me as a host so I can share my screen?
Done.
Okay, can you all see that okay, since I'm logging in?
Yeah, it looks
Yeah?
good. Thanks, Kylie.
Okay, thank you. So I don't have a significant amount of information to add regarding the city staffing challenges. I think the department heads who spoke this evening did an excellent job describing that. I do want to call attention to the recruitment trends that have happened. Fiscal year 2019-2020 was kind of our last, quote, normal year, pre-pandemic, with just a couple months of COVID in that first fiscal year. This information is also pulled from our applicant tracking system that we use, which we started early in calendar year 2019. So I don't have good data for years prior to that. So that's one of the reasons I chose these years to demonstrate this difference. The regularly budgeted positions that I'm calling out on this slide are full-time positions or regularly budgeted part-time positions that we recruit for. That last normal year, we recruited, we had 20 recruitments for that. We also have, a pretty decent amount of seasonal and part-time recruitments that occur at the city, but I did not include those in these numbers. This current fiscal year, which is not done yet, we've got 45 recruitments that we've managed, and we've got a couple on deck to post in the next week or two. So that, I think, sends the message that we are recruiting like crazy. We're losing employees to retirement, to just resignations, folks taking other positions. And as Chief Scales described earlier, people leaving a profession entirely. So this is, I think, a good demonstration of that impact. The challenges that I'm seeing for McMinnville, and this is the same for many other local governments of our size, is there's challenges with compensation. And I know we've definitely made some changes in that arena. But when we compare to places like Portland and Hillsborough and Beaverton, we're still not quite there. And we're not going to be there. But it's challenging because we're competing with metro area talent quite often. I believe a few different department heads described the financial challenges as a concern. It's particularly troubling for candidates when they do their research on the city and go back and watch council meetings or review budget documents or packets and things like that, and see that we've had a furlough program, and they see that we've had budget challenges. It does not inspire confidence in candidates to apply for our positions. Also, folks looking at working for the city will see there's a clear lack of resources, and that includes those lean staffing levels. And I know there was some discussion about this massive HR department we have at the city of McMinnville, but that's just one piece of it. We've got a one-person communication show. We've got a city recorder that has no backup. We have other departments that are running extremely lean. And while we like to call ourselves scrappy, it's hard to find people who want to work for a scrappy organization. And it's very clear that that's where we're at as an employer. Our geographic location is also quite challenging. McMinnville is a bit isolated from the larger cities of Portland, Eugene, and Salem. We're just far enough away that people don't want to make that drive. So it's just that distance that makes that a challenge for us. And although we do have some remote work options available, it's not 100% remote for any position. And it's not for every position. So that comes up as a challenge for us as well. I want to call out distaste for government work. There was a recent article that our city manager shared with the executive team. I'm happy to pass that along to council about a growing distaste for working in the public sector, particularly among young people. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But, some of the reasons are difficulty in feeling a part of decision-making, in slow processes, and in not being able to make an impact quickly. And so that's troubling, and it's hard because we need to hire really great people of any age, but as we start losing employees to retirements, we're going to be replacing them often with people who are younger. And if they don't want to work for the government, we're going to have a hard time filling those roles. So that's a big challenge we're seeing. I mentioned paid family leave. Many of you might be aware that the state of Oregon has a paid family leave medical insurance program that's going to be coming online, run through the state's employment department. That's a program that is still being built and the rules are still being finalized. It will help to provide some paid family leave, but there are a lot of private employers that just straight up pay it. And so when people are looking at taking a job and they want to grow their own family, or they might have medical challenges going on in their life, not having access to paid medical leave can be difficult for them. Childcare is something else that I want to mention, and this really reared its head more prominently during COVID when schools and childcare facilities were shut down. It's very challenging for employees where there are one or maybe a single parent family or a two-person family with both parents working to find affordable childcare that allows them to work. There's many stories, a lot of them anecdotal. I'm sure I could find some data out there about people who aren't able to take a job because their job would only pay for the childcare and it renders it completely useless. to do that. So those are just some challenges I see from a recruiting perspective. We've got some tough hurdles ahead of us, and we're not alone in that. McMinnville is one of many cities and employers in general that are going through these same challenges. I want to call some specific attention for the budget committee, and a few of the department heads talked about this, but the significant time and effort it takes to do a quality recruitment, it's massive. And it's not just post a job and you'll get people. It's spend your time crafting a well thought out and well written job announcement that inspires people to apply for our positions. It's crafting very thoughtful interview questions that are designed to elicit responses that help us make the best hiring decision we can make. So we're not out there asking just canned questions every time. We're spending the time to create questions that help us make a better decision, and that takes time and effort. Reviewing job applications is a significant amount of time. I look at every single application that comes in. I know there are a lot of people who think that applicant tracking system will just do that for you, and an applicant tracking system is a glorified filing cabinet that helps you be organized, but it doesn't help you assess an application. So we look at every app that comes in. I pass the good ones along to the hiring managers and they closely review those. They might have a team of people taking a look at those materials. And from there, we schedule our interviews or assessment centers or exams or any of those types of things, which again, take time. For example, we have our city attorney recruitment open right now. We plan to interview for that in the middle of June. That's going to involve our entire executive team. It's a lot of people to have in the room helping to make a decision. It's the right way to do it. But all of those folks are going to be interviewing candidates and not working on the projects and the service delivery that we need to provide to our community. So our recruitments, they just take time. Another thing that takes a lot of time is checking references, doing backgrounds, checking transcripts when that's required or warranted. Those things they take time to get done. And I do a lot of it. And our hiring managers shoulder that burden as well, because I don't have the time to do all of it. Onboarding and orientation is a massive time cost for any kind of recruitment. I think we all know no one hits the ground running. You've got to learn the culture of the organization. You have to learn the policies. You have to learn the rules, all of those things. And those just take time and effort, specifically from a supervisor, but also from an entire department. And there's that time that employee is not performing at the level of someone who's more seasoned in the role. So those all have some trade-off costs, and that includes training as well. So recruitments take a ton of time. I need to impress that upon everyone here. It's not just a simple post a job and you're going to find your person. There's a ton of legwork that goes on in the back. I do a lot of it, but our hiring managers and their departments do a ton of it as well. And when we have an increase of recruitments from 20 to 45, it's a massive time suck for everybody. It just takes a lot of our time. I want to show some trends about our workforce staffing. Thanks to Jennifer for helping pull some of these slides together while I was in bargaining all day. So this graph will demonstrate staffing trends from fiscal year 03 versus this current fiscal year 22. We wanted to show this because it demonstrates where our staffing increases have occurred. And you'll notice it's predominantly within police and fire. And we've seen decreases in some departments and very subtle increases in others. So we're not adding massive amounts of staffing in the majority of our departments in McMinnville. We're kind of just keeping things going.
Hey, Kylie, the slide didn't advance.
It didn't? I clicked on it. Hang on. Did it advance now?
No.
No, we're not seeing the slideshow version right now. We're seeing the sidebar with the slides, and it's stuck on slide 1.
There we go.
Can you see that? Oh, I said do slideshow, but it's not doing it.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to do it like this then. So this will demonstrate back to what I was saying. Thank you. Those staffing adjustments over the years from fiscal year 03 to fiscal year 22. As I mentioned, smaller increases in many of our departments and more significant increases within police and fire. And this is departments across the city. This slide will demonstrate specifically for general fund departments for staffing. So you'll see here again, police and fire have the predominant increases, small increases in the administrative division, a little bit in planning and the municipal court. But when you look at Parks and Rec, they've dropped down a little bit, and the libraries also dropped down just a little bit. So I wanted to show that, and I'll go to the final slide here. I'm happy to take questions. You'll see this in your proposed budget, but it's just a breakdown of our full-time equivalencies by department, so you can see where those are going within the organization to our different departments. And I'm happy to take any questions.
The previous slide, Kylie, were those the actual employment numbers?
Jennifer may need to step in. I believe these are the numbers.
They're budgeted numbers because,
Right, okay.
Yeah, because our system doesn't track the actuals that way.
I wonder if the chief could maybe express what transpired that, fire chief, sorry, I should have been more clear, that would have led to such a huge increase in the fire department.
So this is 20 years, right? Yes.
Right, but I mean, I think there were some structural changes that have occurred over that time, and I'm
Right, so I can speak to 14 of those 20, so prior to me. We've added, in my tenure here since 2008, we've modified our frontline engine to include that as paid staff engine. We also added a second 24-hour ambulance. I'm sorry, a third 24-hour ambulance. We converted 6 part-time positions, which were basically 12-hour staff, to 24-hour staff. We've added, more recently, we've added 3 additional full-time positions to cover for vacations and holiday time off. We've added a floating position for vacation to cover for time off. And now we're adding the 4th 24-hour ambulance. And in addition to that, in that time frame, we added a peak unit back when we first entered into the contract with Amity, which we still have funding for, but we're working on worked with the union to convert that into two-day positions. So that's the numbers that where those numbers come from.
Rich, training officer and deputy fire marshal.
Training officer, deputy fire marshal. There was a period back in 09 where we laid off the fire marshal, and then we brought in the fire marshal. We added the deputy fire marshal, and we also added the support services technician position when we were working through the care home issue.
Besides the fire and life safety position that was eliminated, is there any other positions that have been eliminated or repurposed?
We have laid up, the fire and life safety position was eliminated completely. The fire marshal was laid off for about a 3-year period and then brought back.
And then of the 20-ish plus positions that it looks like are up there in that 20-year period, how many of those were funded through like your own revenue recapture versus actual us going for general fund?
So in 2014, we always have an offset. Part of the projections of increasing staffing since I've been here is finding a revenue source to offset some of those numbers. And as call volumes increased, that meant we have the capacity to have a return on investment by capturing calls that we couldn't capture before. So there is a portion of the calls. I couldn't tell you specifically, Councilor Garvin, on what that meant. In this case, in this year's budget right now, we're anticipating about $155,000 of additional revenue based on calls we lost last year and the year before.
Okay.
And how much additional revenue are you expecting from Medicare, Medicaid reimbursement?
Medicare, nothing. Medicaid, this year we're anticipating $900,000 based off of the number of Medicaid calls that we transport that are CCO clients.
Thank you.
That,
That was really
Kelly?
what I was getting at was, there is a significant staff number increase, but I don't want budget committee members and other council members to think that over the last 20 years, the city has only poured money into the fire department, only poured money into police. When you're looking at that bar graph, that's what a quick snapshot would look at from the citizens. And so I just want to make sure that's delineated among staff and among budget committee members.
That's exactly what I was getting at as well. It kind of is a misleading picture.
I don't understand what.
Mr. Chairman, can I say something?
Kelly has a question, so
Since I've had my hand up for quite a while.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Chief, as I look at the graph and stuff, how much of that is due to also a great reduction in volunteerism due to changes in life circumstances? Because we used to have a very large volunteer force, and we now are quite a bit less.
we have.
Does that affect these numbers?
Well, yes, in the long run, it affects the numbers because we don't have the volunteer capacity, particularly during the daytime hours. And now it's starting to extend into the evening hours to staff the engines. That was when we made the move to staff the frontline engine. So those positions on that vehicle are directly in correlation to the lack of volunteers able to respond on fire calls.
So that's part of the reason for the great discrepancy of prior personnel versus what's currently up there.
That was the driver behind additional staffing, correct? Part of the driver.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to make a point of.
That and increased call volume were the two primary drivers behind the reasons for the additional staffing requirements.
Adam, I
Thank you.
didn't understand
Well,
your.
Thank you, Chief.
We've had a hand up here for quite a while, so.
Kylie, I'm just wondering, can you tell me, I could probably do the math here somewhere, but what is our approximate number of employees in the city of McMinnville?
I don't have a head count of employees, but we usually say about 230 FTE. I don't have the proposed
Okay, no,
budget.
that's what, and what is the number of staff in HR?
One.
Yeah, I have to say, when I was reviewing the budget, I had real concerns when I looked at the core services. It's page 528, and below base was the hiring and onboarding and training and retention. I think that can permeate into other areas of the city, and I can't even imagine, that number of searches having one person in HR. So I think that is a concern and something we should look at in the future. I think it would help not just HR, but help other areas as well.
So Debbie, the proposed full-time FTE is 230.34
Okay. Yeah,
on page 50.
a lot for one person.
So,
Goes off by 0.34.
so question on that though, Kylie, you made,
I just wanted to follow up with the question that I had for Adam earlier. You said that this snapshot isn't accurate because we bring in other monies to cover some of these positions, is that?
So, for example, would be when you bring on another ambulance, 24-hour ambulance, you're going to bring on 6 staff. Well, if those costs are being recaptured by the revenue that ambulance is generating, that's not a direct impact as far as general fund dollars and what we levy as tax revenue to fund the fire department, because that ambulance is self-funding itself, just like our overhire position that was authorized before my time on council. That was funded through overtime savings. So it's not an increase in funding for the fire department.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't it true that the funding hole that we're in is largely or significantly because the reimbursement rates haven't been adequate for several years?
Yeah, no, and I would agree with that.
So that's somewhat being corrected this year by the state, but we've had,
Yeah.
I mean, so we are, I mean, a lot of this has impacted the general fund over this period.
It's impacted the general fund, but looking
Some
at
of
that,
it's
it looks
offset.
like the council over the last 20 years has only invested in fire and police, and I don't think that's accurate.
Well, I think what it seems to me is that in the last 2 or 3 years, we've done a lot of work to get KOB self-sufficient so that it's not spending down its reserve.
Yeah.
So that staff increase, I think, is a reflection of what KOB's service delivery is. And am I right, Jennifer, that KOB is now self-sustaining?
Well, it's outsourced, I guess, so I can't.
But it's not impacting our budget is the point. Yeah.
By the
so-
end of next year, it
Yeah.
should be off the books.
But then if you take out
Right,
police
Zach?
and fire and KOB, it seems to me that our staffing level is maybe 4 or 5 positions more than it was in 2002 from this graph. So we haven't really, it's not like we've been investing a lot of money in other places for staffing. You know, we've been putting more money into fire, we've been putting more money into police. We haven't been adding capacity in other areas, it seems to me, for 20 years.
Do we have any more questions for Kylie?
I do. I have a quick
Well,
question.
let's go ahead and address her. She's the,
I know you said you're the only HR person, and thank you for the work you're doing. You're carrying a heavy load, and we appreciate that. But you did just make reference to hiring managers in other departments. How many departments have hiring managers, and are those full-time?
Hiring managers is another word for the manager or the department head. So
Okay,
our
gotcha.
department heads or our supervisors, when we're in a recruitment
So just assisting you.
setting, we refer to them as a hiring manager.
I have a follow-up for Kylie as well. Given what you just presented and how much is on your plate, is there anything that could be delineated back to the hiring managers that you've taken on as your position that would build efficiencies within HR while you're building up your department?
So one thing that we are working on is for our part-time or seasonal recruitments is having like the division type managers in the Parks and Rec department and in the library manage those recruitments on their own. So that's one small thing. I don't want to go into great detail about all the work I get to do with the city of McMinnville, but there's a lot of it that really shouldn't be done by somebody else. Workplace investigations, things like that. There's also, for bargaining, it does take up a significant amount of time. It's usually once every 3 years. But, that's something where if I weren't doing that, the chiefs or an assistant chief or captain might be in that role, or we might have to pay an employment attorney to do it for us. So moving some of those duties around, it may be, something that we should consider at some point, or for some specific things, but there are some trade-offs when we do that. I was hired to help centralize this function of our organization. And I would feel pretty bad if I had to say, well, I'm going to give you back all the stuff that I told you we could do for you. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
it looks
Thanks,
like we're
Kylie.
ready to move on.
Think so, yes. You got a couple of slides floating around there?
I do,
Just two, awesome. So while Jennifer's loading the slides, let me just talk real briefly at a high level about the overall administration budget. It has city manager's office, which should be self-explanatory. It's me and it's Noel for communications, a little bit of Claudia's time. City Hall and city property are the buildings that are associated with admin. It's this building, City Hall, and the Nelson House where the chamber used to live. Mayor and council budget, which is where the rest of Claudia's time is. Legal, which is 1.5 FTE, all of which are vacant right now, by the way. Community services, which is sort of our outward-facing programs. Most of that is economic development, public art. We've got a significant ARPA project there for translation services. And then HR, Kylie mentioned, it's her position right now, and we do have a vacant support services position, it's been vacant for 2 years because the primary work that position did was supporting municipal court and the prosecutor. And when we outsourced prosecutor and court shut down and then went virtual, we have left that position vacant for vacancy savings. So that's just a high-level recap. Chris, in terms of the FTE question, based on the changes, we removed the ad package that would have added an HR analyst. That only shows up as half an FTE because we were assuming we wouldn't get that position filled until January 1st. So there should be in that half FTE difference between the original proposed budget and what's before you now. And with that, talk a little bit about some of the investments that we've made in human resources and community engagement activities were removed. A couple of them were significant, either consultant-based projects or, in the case of HR, staffing. We were also planning to establish a centralized facilities maintenance function that was pulled from the budget that was originally part of the updated proposed budget. We do continue supporting Downtown Art Program, Transit Authority, Economic Development Partnership. Those were not reduced from their original proposed levels. Again, MacTown 2032 has been one of the primary drivers for the city manager's office and admin to move forward. We're continuing to do that even in this particular budget, but substantial movement in a number of those initiatives will require additional investment, some of which we're able to move forward with some of our ARPA dollars, and some of which we will be able to move forward with new sustainable revenues. And we're continuing to support the DEI program through our admin budget as well. Most of that support comes in the form of HR staff support for the DEI Advisory Committee. We've also budgeted some ARPA funds to help with some of our engagement and outreach, particularly second language materials and activities. That was it. Didn't take 10 minutes. I will say, you may have missed it, Chief Scales sort of stole a little bit of my thunder. I am daily impressed by the management of this organization and the executive team in particular. This process that you're participating in right now became known to the group on Thursday morning of last week. That was a complete course correction in terms of what we had anticipated doing, and I will tell you that there was a brief. I mean, we worked our way through the 5 steps pretty quickly.
Brief rebellion.
Anger, denial, acceptance, that sort of thing. I think Matt went through them all in about 12 minutes and did a great job. We appreciate your time and attention. I'm talking fast because I know you're over time. We went longer than I thought we might tonight. I don't want to curtail any questions or observations you have about admin, though, so I'm going to stop talking and respond as best I can to any questions or comments you have.
Around the table?
I don't have any questions for admin, but while I got the mic, I'm just going to say thank you all. You guys, this approach to doing the budget is like, thank you. I really appreciate this. This is really well done. I really, having you guys here in a conversation where we can work together, I really, really like. And I want to thank the finance department. The work you've done is excellent. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Whoops. Anything else?
If you don't have any questions, I think it would be appropriate to recess the meeting until tomorrow night.
I know you're one for platitudes, but I'll jump in. Previous years I was vocal in objecting to the process and even used my vote to communicate that. So I just want to add to the choruses of the changes to the budget process that have happened, and I had a great time. And I really appreciate the storytelling and the ways in which you guys have conveyed. And the course services and the ad packages have been my Rosetta Stone to understanding how to talk about what we do and how to ask better questions and be more informed and hopefully get you guys what you need.
Okay, I think we're good to go.
Good job, Jerry, for getting us out of here before 11.
We're continuing to.
Recessing?